the Death Star. No Brits was involved, no fingers could be pointed.
You carry on taking the medication, George. Yes, I'd send all the Labour government to space with a one-way ticket and throw in the SNP for being useless. They're all a bunch of... Oh, all right, fair enough.
One person, quite frankly, I think needs to go to space in a one-way journey is Jeremy Kyle. He goes on about his age one more time, how he's 60 this year, he was 59 last year, repetitively over the course of the weeks and months. We have to hear him, I'm 60 this year, I'm 60 this year.
Richard Tice, did you put that cheeky bugger up to that?
I'm hoping he's going to send me the invoice because that was absolutely brilliant.
Which MP would you send to space?
Oh, no, I'll get in terrible trouble if I answer that. But it's fair to say there's quite a long list.
The sad thing is about sending people into space on a one-way ticket is I don't think that we've built a spaceship big enough to take the lunatics off this planet. I mean, from the net zero loonies to the transgender loonies to the racists to the terrorists, there is just so many to the wokerati. We need some big spaceships.
Big spaceships.
Good evening. I never know how you're going to start this conversation, Jeremy.
Katy Perry went to space today, OK? Who would you send... I'd love her to say what I wanted to, but I'd never disrespect her. Who would you send to space who could never come back?
Well, I'd be happy to send Ed Miliband to space, I think.
Oh, that is an outrageous question, so I'm not even going to answer that question.
Sam Matterface, so you get the job, yeah? Come on.
No, Sam Matterface, I tell you what, there's no.
I think David Lammy would be the person I'd want to send up in space and never come back again.
Yeah, the problem is how much would the bill be for him to munch through whatever food on the way there?
Hey, it worked.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 6. It is, of course, Friday. It's Friday the 6th of June. We've reached the end of another amazing week, ladies and gentlemen, and it really has been amazing. A couple of earthquakes to report this morning. The Labour government have actually won an election. Incredible. They've actually won an election over the SNP up in Scotland, Hamilton. It's only an election for the local Scottish MSP seat. However, you wouldn't have thought, if you were talking to me yesterday, that Labour would be able to win anything. A lot of people thought Reform would do it. A lot of people thought Reform would have the nous and the wherewithal and just the big mo, if you like, to actually win in Hamilton. And a lot of people were predicting it. I think I was expecting it, I have to say. And the one thing that I read yesterday said basically this is a fight between Reform and the SNP. And it turns out that they took everybody by surprise. So no doubt Keir Starmer will be absolutely lauding it up this morning. Anas Sarwar, who's not a bad guy, has won a seat over the SNP. So a bit of a blow for Reform. However, they came third and they're only 3 to 5% behind. So actually it's a pretty good night for Reform as well. Of course, the other big story is that Zia Yusuf, the chairman of Reform, resigned late yesterday afternoon, early evening yesterday, much to everybody's surprise. Nobody's quite sure why it's all happened. Nigel Farage has been very gracious about it and said, look, the man did what he did. He did a great job for us and he's decided now it's time for him to move on. Tom Slater's here. Very good morning, Tom. We'll be picking the bones out of that because, of course, a lot of the papers this morning are making out that it's a disaster for Reform. I'm not sure it is. The Telegraph actually leads on it, saying Reform's civil war over Burka ban. Is it about the Burka? You know, we put it out yesterday. We talked about it an awful lot. Sarah Pochin, the new Reform MP, actually asked a question in the House of Commons. So much groaning and moaning and gnashing of teeth and sharp intakes of breath. How could she ever ask such a question? It turns out that Zia Yusuf is gone. An awful lot of the people that I know who are Reform voters and Reform supporters are not that bothered. They think, well, you know what? Nigel Farage is running the party. Nigel Farage is the man. Nigel Farage is the guy that's got it all done. People will come and go. Rupert Lowe came and went. Didn't seem to have any effect on them. Zia Yusuf will come and go. Won't probably have too much effect on them. But we shall see. Meanwhile, lots of other stories to talk about this morning as well, including Wes Streeting, who's recommending that if you are one of the, in their words, walking wounded, don't bother going to A&E. You find somewhere else to go because they don't need to see you unless you're literally dying. So don't go to A&E unless you've had a heart attack. Don't go to A&E unless one of your legs is falling off and it's been severed in some kind of bizarre car accident. If you're not feeling particularly well and you can't get a doctor's appointment, please do not go to A&E. What is wrong with these idiots? It's called the National Health Service. It's not called the National Death Service. You're not supposed to just turn up if you're likely to die. You should be able to turn up at hospital to get fixed up, shouldn't you? 0344 499 1000. We'll talk about Greta Thunberg. Her flotilla gets ever closer to Gaza and ever closer to being raided by Israeli commandos, which I'm quite looking forward to. Meanwhile, there's been a bit of a rift between Elon Musk and Donald Trump. We'll talk about that as well. The search for Madeleine McCann appears to have turned up absolutely nothing after 3 days. And the Prime Minister, by the way, has apparently agreed to spending 3.5% of GDP on defence, even though he wouldn't do that just at the beginning of this week. They say a week is a long time in politics. I'll tell you what, it certainly is in this business. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This, of course, is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. A very good morning to you and welcome to Friday, the start of the weekend. I think it's going to be a pretty grim one because it's looking a bit dull and dim and horrible, and it's going to rain. Tom Slater's here, though, to cheer us all up. Tom, very good morning to you. Two big stories, I suppose, overnight. One, the Labour win in Hamilton, which was unexpected at the very least. I mean, I saw polls even towards the beginning of the day, which said this is a fight between the SNP and Reform. Reform have done brilliantly. Reform have managed to catch up. They've capitalised on the fact that Hamilton, which is a very working class part of sort of the outskirts of Glasgow, if you like, and it seemed as though when Nigel Farage went up there the other day, that everybody was cheering for, Reform on, and so Labour kind of came out of nowhere to win it, didn't they?
No, absolutely. This wasn't what people were expecting. There was a lot of debate about whether or not Reform could push Labour into third place, perhaps even nick it. I mean, it's still worth saying it's a very respectable.
Reform did very well, yeah.
You know, absolutely, especially because
the trouble is the expectations for them are so high because they appear to be dominating every conversation at the moment in politics, don't they?
No, completely. You would, you know, it's easy to forget the fact this party wasn't around a few years ago, and also the idea that it was going to make inroads into Scotland, that's brand new. No one thought that was going to happen, you know, because of the fact that Nigel Farage's various parties have never really had much cut through there, but they're certainly getting cut through now. It was a surprise win for Labour, and it's something that, of course, I'm sure Keir Starmer and Anna Sarwar will take.
I don't think even Labour expected it, did they?
No, absolutely. They looked as shocked as anyone else. So but you know, at the same time, I think it's still quite clear that from what people reported from the doorstep, from what was coming out from the campaign, is that there is still this kind of sense that Labour are a little bit missionless, whether that's north of the border or south of the border. But they've managed to get away with it this time around.
Yeah, they have. And of course, what the main, I suppose, result will be for Reform making progress in Scotland is they do have proportional representation there. So in the event that there is a major election, which I think comes next year, Reform will probably get quite a lot of MSPs in because of the way that the list system works. I mean, you know, they were only 3 or 5% behind Labour, I think, in this particular by-election. So they will get a significant boost, I would say, in the Scottish Parliament. So they could actually become part of a coalition or part of a ruling party.
No, absolutely. And proportional representation has always been very good to Nigel Farage. It's one of the reasons that until recently, when he was starting to lead the polls, he was campaigning very much for it. So yeah, both in Scotland and in Wales, it's going to be fascinating to see how much of a foothold they can gain in Scotland.
Absolutely. And the other big story, I suppose, for us down here is front page of the Daily Telegraph. Big picture of Zia Yusuf and Nigel Farage. Reform civil war over Burka ban. I don't know whether you've been speaking to anybody about, you know, what's actually been going on, but I saw an interview last night with Nigel Farage, and he was very gracious about Zia Yusuf. He said, look, this is a guy who came to me years ago. He wanted to get involved in politics. You know, he gave us some money. He admitted that. We put him in charge of sort of professionalising the organisation, but he simply had enough. He said he's just, it's a very tough business. Politics isn't very nice. So there will be those, I dare say, on the Conservative and Labour side who will sort of dance on the grave of Zia Yusuf and go, oh, look at this, they can't run, a piss up in a brewery, as some people would say. Apologies for that this time of the morning. But, it's the only way to describe it. But I don't see this. I mean, Farage has had, they had the knockback with Rupert Lowe. It doesn't seem to affect them terribly, does it?
I think that's a fair point insofar as Zia Yusuf also, he's a kind of someone who was much more behind the scenes. Yes, he would go out and do media and so on, but the big contribution he was making was not just financial, it was organisational. He was very much charged with, this word is a bit loaded, but professionalising the party, building out its infrastructure, all of which I think it seems to have been incredibly successful if you look at the way in which they've been able to continue to take the fight to Labour. So it's not necessarily that there's going to be kind of swathes of voters who feel like their man has been removed, but I still think it could be consequential because of the fact that he brought something which Reform didn't have before, which is someone with that organisational now, someone with a sense of like building this thing out, in not just being a kind of campaigning organisation, but actually becoming a party. So that may well impact them, but I think it's not something that's necessarily going to show up in the polls or is going to be, the talk down the dog.
But it's interesting, isn't it? Because it does seem as though people do fall out with Nigel Farage, but he kind of continues to be the man in place. And I don't know whether it was about the Burka ban. I mean, there was a very sort of bizarre series of tweets that went on after Sarah Pochin made that intervention in Parliament, when she asked the question, basically, would Keir Starmer, consider banning the Burka? And as I said, there was this ridiculous kind of sharp intake of breath from everybody. They were like, oh my goodness me, how could you ask that question? He then put out a tweet saying, I think, initially, or somebody did, that it wasn't Reform policy. And he then put out a tweet later saying it was a bit dumb to actually ask a question of a party when you weren't going to do it yourself. And that just seemed a bit provocative unnecessarily, didn't it? And also, I suppose, it's one of those things where clearly not being on the same page about this particular issue, it also exposes him to looking a bit stupid, because if you make that kind of comment and then you followed up by the fact that Nigel Farage seemed to, if not endorse the policy per se, certainly, suggest that that's something you could be open to. It just looked like a bit of a mess. I imagine what happened here was that Zia Yusuf was saying he's, been working, non-stop trying to build out this party. They're getting an awful lot of flack for doing so, not from people outside Reform, but also from people inside Reform. Well, during the whole Rupert Lowe row, he was the one that was getting blamed for it, wasn't it? And people were saying, Zia Yusuf's the problem, Zia Yusuf is the guy that's causing all of this, and this is why Rupert Lowe's fallen out. I mean, Rupert Lowe is a curious individual, I don't think there's any doubt about that. And he's been, telling people, I mean, he had a go at me the other week. He said, there's no need to be unpleasant. When I said, why are you doing interviews with Emily Maitlis when you don't come on Talk? And I said, you're not as important as you think you are. And he went, how are you being so unpleasant? And only just the other day, somebody asked him a question, and he went, you're obviously a nutter. And I thought, well, if you're talking about being unpleasant to people, why are you calling people nutters on, on social media? So, it's all much of a muchness, but as I say, there will be people who will sort of feast on this and go, Reform are finished, they can't organise anything. But in fact, I don't believe that to be the case. No, absolutely. And it's one of those, also, this is a unique one insofar as this isn't Nigel Farage cutting down another tall poppy, as people would like to call it. He's clearly had enough. I think that seems to be a combination of the amount of work he was putting in. It's quite a thankless task. He was getting a lot of abuse from all sides. Despite the fact that, as we were talking about, he made a really significant contribution to this party in a way that was a little bit unsung, I think. And I think you saw the fact that Farage responded kind of more in sadness than in anger would indicate that this did come out of the blue. It probably was a combination of factors. Again, that the Burka issue seeming to at least expose a lack of coherence in the party, and him saying it wasn't party policy, but then other MPs almost implying that it was. Maybe that was just the straw that broke the camel's back. I said at the time, I can't believe Sarah Pochin would have asked that question without Nigel Farage knowing she was going to ask that question. I mean, he was sitting right next to her. The only person in between them was Richard Tice. I'm sure he knew, and he came on the show yesterday and said basically, look, obviously we're not a party which guarantees that everybody thinks the same way. However, it's an important issue, and it's something that we should be debating. And I think that's a pretty sensible place for them to be, isn't it? And I think so. And they've done that on a couple of kind of big controversial issues. If you think about assisted dying, there's a number of the MPs in Reform who actually backed that legislation first time around, although it seems like most of them have changed their minds now. So this is one thing that they're kind of embracing, which is a level of
we don't all have to be on the same page about these things.
Right.
So maybe that was another example. But I think when, for whatever reason, I think this is probably one smaller thing which just made him think, you know what, I've had enough of this, and started moving.
And I think I can imagine, and there were those who before yesterday were saying that Zia Yusuf has been kind of sidelined and he's been pushed out of the mainstream of the party to become the sort of the head of Doge, because also the other guy that they hired, this sort of new tech genius guy whose name escapes me for the moment, he's also gone. So there's obviously something going on in that area as well, because that was going to be where they were going to be scrutinised in the most probably difficult way for them, because going into all these local councils trying to work out where they'd wasted money, and it started out looking like they were doing a pretty good job. But now you have to ask who's doing that.
No, absolutely, and that's something that's worth remembering, because the local elections means that they're actually got to govern in those places and those councils that they've won. They've got to show that this sort of localised version of Doge could be actually paying dividends, and just you want that to be going to work, showing all kinds of crazy ways. That's a big operation if you're going to do that properly. So big questions about who is going to spearhead that initiative now that Yusuf is on the way.
Yeah, absolutely right. Let's remind ourselves of how this all started. Sarah Pochin on Prime Minister's Questions, asking this question on the Burka.
Given the Prime Minister's desire to strengthen strategic alignment with our European neighbours, will he, in the interests of public safety, follow the lead of France, Denmark, Belgium and others and ban the burqa?
Yeah, here. Prime Minister.
Can I welcome her to her place? But I'm not going to follow her down that line. But now she is here and safely in her place, perhaps she could tell her new party leader that his latest plan to bet £80 billion of unfunded tax cuts, there's no idea how he's going to pay for it, is Liz Truss all over again. Although, considering I think she was a Conservative member when Liz Truss was leader, she probably won't.
Yeah, I mean, Starmer didn't handle that very well either, because the Prime Minister's Questions don't bother answering it. People have said since then, why didn't you just say, no, I don't actually want to ban the burqa, because I don't think that's the sort of way that we should be proceeding, instead of which he just avoids the whole question.
No, and it wasn't even his pre-prepared lines he stumbled across along with. That's the thing about Starmer, he's so not sure-footed. And as you say, just answer the question. There's a perfectly legitimate case to be made, even if you don't like the burqa, even if you do think it's a misogynistic garment, say, well, it's not the role of the government to help people what they should wear. Just say it, but he can't. He just has to go back to the script every time.
Yeah, exactly right. And this is what Zia Yusuf put out after that. He said, nothing to do with me. I had no idea about the question, nor that it wasn't policy, busy with other stuff. I do think it's dumb for a party to ask the Prime Minister if they would do something the party itself wouldn't do. And I think that perhaps caused something of a rift, because you would imagine if he's calling the newest Reform MP, Sarah Pochin, dumb, that's not a great look for the chairman of the party.
It's not, no, and it's one of those things where it might have been a kind of hastily drafted tweet. To be honest, though, it's the sort of thing that I can imagine could have been smoothed over.
Yeah.
I think probably the key thing here is he has been working at this. He's new to politics as well. This is something that he's kind of hopped into this arena relatively recently. I'm not saying he bit off more than he can chew, but he's clearly got other things that he would probably perhaps want to be getting on with. He's a very successful businessman, and because of the fact that it has been a bit of a thankless task at times, and the brickbats that you get in all directions, maybe this was just the thing that you know what.
It's a bit like people getting into this business, when you're not really prepared for it. The bits that you don't think are going to be difficult are difficult, and the bits that you think are going to be easy are not quite so easy. He also tweeted this 12 hours ago. 11 months ago, I became chairman of Reform. I've worked full-time as a volunteer to take the party from 14 to 30%, quadrupled its membership and delivered historic electoral results. I no longer believe working to get a Reform government elected is a good use of my time, and hereby resign the office. It's quite a mysterious tweet, that. What do you mean it's not a good use of your time?
I think you're forced to kind of read between the lines a little bit, aren't you? Like, is it suggesting that that's something that he's not as interested in getting Reform elected as previously? It leaves so many more questions.
Well, yeah, because he could have said, I'm grateful to Nigel Farage for giving me the opportunity to involve myself in politics at the grassroots level, blah, 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 whatever.
I will continue to support Reform in my own way, or whatever it might be, but
there's no mention of Farage, there's no mention of the party that he loves. I'm taking my leave of it because, I've got other things going on. I mean, it's quite a sort of I would say, gnarly tweets. It's a bit bitter.
Yeah, and without wanting to sort of speculate on people's circumstances and stuff, there is something in politics at the moment where people jump in and jump out at the slightest opportunity. I'm sure we'll get on to what's been going on in America.
Well, we certainly will,
but there's a parallel there where people, for whatever reason, there's not as much staying power as there used to be. People aren't in it for the long game as much as they used to.
Well, Christian and I were talking about it, my producer, and they all seem very thin-skinned now, don't they? It's like, what do you mean? And I said, it's a bit like me waking up one morning and putting a tweet out about my boss or about my producer, going, he's a bit of a dickhead. I don't know why I work with him. I'm sorry. Oh, sorry, mate. Everything's fine. And then you go, well, no, it's not fine, actually. You've just called me a bad name on social media, Anyway, let's have a look at what reform was like in happier times.
I'd like to introduce you to the leader of Reform UK, the Member of Parliament for Clacton-on-Sea and the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Mr Nigel Farage.
Good morning, everybody. How fortunate I've been, or perhaps it was just good judgment, in picking Zia as party chairman, because the big thing we had to do after the last general election was to professionalise the party, and we've done that.
And, of course, we have done that, as he says, but he now has to look for another chairman. And who will that person be? What sort of person will it be? Who will he look at? What sort of individuals would qualify to do that sort of job, Because everybody can see, it looks to me anyway, that Nigel Farage is reform still.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And it's one of those things where reform's big challenge now, because they've clearly got the populist energy, they're clearly making the political weather in a way that they have previously. They do now need to attract really kind of high calibre individuals to build out the party and potentially then to sort of govern. And I think when Zia Yusuf came on board, it was an indication that maybe they could attract those kinds of people. He's a very impressive person, very successful person, clearly very determined until he hopped out quite inauspiciously. But so that's going to be the question now, is that can they continue to attract people who can really help them build on what they've started?
And as I say, what happens to this new sort of, reform Doge operation, which was effectively being run by Zia Yusuf? I mean, until yesterday morning, he was still tweeting out things about, local councils where he discovered incredible amounts of waste, which was a great job that he was doing. So somebody now has to come in and do that. Yeah. Because, as I say, the other guy, Nathaniel, what's his name? Nathaniel Reid, Freed, has gone as well. So it's all smoke and mirrors. Let's get a voice note from James.
Good morning, Mike. Now, bloody Starmer and Rachel Reeves, they sound even worse than what they normally bloody sound like. And I thought this bloody plonker Starmer, he was supposed to be a human rights lawyer. Now, surely you have to learn how to speak properly. My God, Mike. I tell you what, Mike, he sounds like the bloody old AOL dial-up internet. Jesus Christ, give me strength. Anyway, Mike, just like to say, morning glory, best breakfast show on the planet. Thanks, Mike. Have a lovely weekend.
James, thank you very much indeed. The weekend does indeed begin here. I mean, I said this yesterday. Plank of the Week goes out, of course, tonight at 7 o'clock. We recorded it the other day. Plank of the Week, I said, Starmer is now apparently doing an impression of me, doing an impression of him. When he stood up at Prime Minister, he couldn't actually answer anything. Thomas Slater's here. We've got lots more to do. We will talk about Elon Musk and Donald Trump, who have also fallen out, it seems. It's all happening right here on Morning Glory. Don't go anywhere.
You know, the overall revenue that's come in from that wheeze is not as high as it should be. So the reality is that she's got to cut spending. She can't just keep on raising taxes to, fund ever-increasing spending. You've got to get spending under control. And cutting back the warm home scheme, which Labour, by the way, doubled from what it was under the Tories, that was one of the methods by which she had hoped to cut a bit of spending. But it seems that she's been defeated in that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6 to 26. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. Morning, Mike, says Sean in Gloucester. Have the Scots gone mad? They voted in the SNP for years and now Labour in the by-election. And then Stuart says this from Hales Owen. I think the Scots voted for the man, not the party. Well, you know, like I say, I mean, there's many things that you can conclude from what happened last night in Hamilton. I'm sure we'll be talking about it throughout the course of the morning. Certainly it looks as though, and from the analysis that I've seen, Tom Harris writing in the Telegraph saying actually a really good result for Reform coming in third, because normally speaking, Reform were nowhere in Scotland, were they? Tom Slater's here. It wasn't a place that they had even any ambition, really.
No, this is something that came out of the clear blue. I remember in the run-up to the general election last summer, there was already starting noises that people were finding kind of on the doorstep, or when people were going out to report on particular races in Scotland, that a surprising number of people were bringing up Farage, were bringing up Reform. Obviously it didn't turn into very much at those general elections, but it was always clear that there were inroads to be made there. The issue of Brexit is kind of behind us, so that is not going to necessarily affect them in quite the same way. It's also worth remembering there is a substantial portion of Scotland that did vote leave. A substantial proportion of the SNP voted leave, particularly its working class base, and so there was always going to be an opportunity there if it was properly seized. And whilst of course this is being written up as a humbling of Reform, you know, in this speech saying that we've sent them packing, their divisive politics and so on and so forth. But at the same time, as you were saying, this is a very respectable result from a party that were nowhere really in Scotland up until really a few months
And certainly, I mean, you wouldn't expect the Tories to do well in Scotland because they don't normally anyway, but again, they're beaten into fourth place, so you know, all of the machinations that they say they're going to do doesn't appear to be cutting through either. Let's get a voice note from Jay.
Morning, guys. Great show as always. Regarding the whole Zia Yusuf thing, I think Nigel needs to come back hard now. I think the bridges with Ben Habib have been burnt, which is a shame, but maybe Nigel and Rupert should get together in private, sit down, chug everything out and say, right, let's start afresh. We both want what's best. Nigel says, I'm running the party. Rupert, you're the person we want back. A lot of the fans want back, the members, etc. We need to get together in private and work something out. Go and have a drink together, sort it out.
Well, funnily enough, Nigel Farage said that last night in an interview that he did, where he said, we can't have people who want to have their, fights with us in public. I mean, that was what the falling out between him and Rupert Lowe was all about, because he felt that Rupert Lowe had gone sort of public on things that they were discussing internally. And, again, like everybody, I mean, in your job, in my job, if people that you're having conversations with suddenly start telling the world about what those conversations are, take you back to Prince Harry, people tend to go, well, do you know what? If you're going to start leaking everything that I'm telling you, then we're not going to have a conversation anymore. No, it's going to be the end.
No, absolutely. There's such.
It's about trust, isn't it?
It's about trust, and it's important in any organisation, but particularly if you're a political party, you need that level of discipline, all being on message, not allowing your internal fights to become public knowledge. All of that's pretty essential. I think in the case of Rupert Lowe, I think he's starting to think that maybe was bigger than the party in a strange sort of way. I mean, it's one of those things where just because you've got a big social media following, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily as essential essential
No.
to the political project.
No.
And there was these great polls that came out at the time he was ousted where, you know, even the vast majority of Reform voters don't even know who he is. So
Yeah.
it's one of those things where people can easily get a bit too big for their boots.
Exactly, and I mean that's really what happened, because it all happened before the big local elections in May, and because Reform swept the board, it was clear that actually whatever the Rupert Lowe fallout was, it didn't affect people's willingness to vote for Reform. So, you know, it's a very young party. I'm not sitting here pretending that there's nothing problematic going on. We'll be talking to Isabel Oakeshott about it. We've been trying to get somebody on from Reform this morning. They don't want to come on for whatever reason, you know, and I think that's a mistake. I think they should have put somebody on. But, you know, we move on, and they will move on, and this will be just another bump in the road, probably. But they do need to get their act together.
Yeah, and there is a certain point in which this merry-go-round of people coming in and out of the party is going to start cutting through. It's going to start looking like a bit too chaotic, a bit too all over the place. I don't think we're at that point yet, but at the same time it's something that they do need to get a grip of if they want to be taken seriously.
Having said that, I mean, you know, nevertheless, you know, you can see the Labour Party and the Tory Party have also had all of these kinds of problems, and they're a lot older than Reform are. I mean, look at the infighting going on in Labour at the moment. You know, there's backbenchers all over the place, you know, wanting Starmer out. There's people backing Angela Rayner to take over. There's people saying, you know, Ed Miliband needs to win the fight against Rachel Reeves. You know, there's all sorts of factionalisation, because that's what politics is all about. And it seems to be, I suppose, a lot more telescopic when it comes to reforms. There's only a few of them. And suddenly, if there's 200 people falling out with each other, it's not such a big story. If there's only 4 of you, you know, suddenly it's a lot more sharp and in focus.
And that's why it's funny seeing the Tories. Obviously, they're trying to make hay out of this. Why wouldn't they? But at the same time, it's like if you're talking about backbiting and infighting and constant regicide, I don't think the Tory party have got much of a leg to stand on. I really don't think they've got many lessons that they can teach anyone. No. Right, it's Friday, so we've got some gaffes for you, and the first one, of course, is from Kevin O'Sullivan.
Senior figures at Party HQ and other figures, like, for example, those that contribute to talkTV, David Bull.
We're not quite sure what's going on there. This was passed to me by several people, and they went, he's got a funny look on his face. There's a strange noise emanating from his particular seat. I'll leave that to your own devices to figure out. Coming up, we're going to talk to Charles Feldman about what is going on in another big political fallout overnight between Elon Musk and Donald Trump. It's coming up next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 6:34. Lots of you getting in touch, and we've got loads of messages coming in. Do keep your voice notes coming as well. 0344 499 1000. This from Joanna in Salisbury. Hi, Mike. As I understand it, Sarah Poachin asked her constituents what should be her first question. It put Keir off balance. It was the right question to ask. Zia Yusuf is not elected. Sarah is. And taking a pot shot at her was unacceptable. If you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. I think most people would probably agree with you. Anne Whittaker would be a great chairman. She takes no prisoners, and she's not afraid to speak her mind, says Maggie. Has Elon Musk and Donald Trump really fallen out? I wonder. Have a good weekend. Well, it's a good question, and we're about to address it with Charles Feldman, US political commentator. I think, Charles, a very good morning to you. If anybody had asked you back in sort of November when Donald Trump won the election with Elon Musk jumping around on the stage and being his chief cheerleader, if somebody had said to you, how long do you think this will last? You'd probably gone, I don't know, about 6 months. And here we are.
Yeah, good morning, Mike. Yeah, it's about right. I don't think anyone thought that these two gigantic egos, you know, Elon Musk and Donald Trump, would be able to coexist in the same, pretty much same spot for too long a period of time. But having said that, I don't think anyone would have, in their wildest imagination, thought that it would end, if it has ended, in the spectacular way that it has. This has got to be, Mike, one of the best tabloid stories in probably decades.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Let's have a look at what happened in happier times. This was only 5 days ago. Elon Musk praising Donald Trump.
And I'll continue to be visiting here and be a friend and advisor to the president, and I look forward to times being back in this amazing room. By the way, isn't this incredible? Look at this incredible. I mean, it's stunning. I think the way that the Oval Office, how the president has just completely redone the Oval Office. It's beautiful. That's it, really. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
All right.
Great job.
And that was Elon Musk, of course, sort of saying goodbye, saying that, I was only ever going to be in for 100 and odd days, and now my time is up and my work is done, and I'll continue to be helpful, and that's all fine. Here's Donald Trump yesterday asked about the criticism from Elon Musk.
You saw a man who was very happy when he stood behind the Oval desk, and even with the black eye, I said, do you want a little makeup? We'll get you a little makeup. But he said, no, I don't think so, which is interesting. And very nice. He wants to be who he is, so you could make that statement too, I guess. Look, Elon and I had a great relationship. I don't know if we're well anymore. I was surprised because you were here. Everybody in this room practically was here as we had a wonderful send-off. He said wonderful things about me. You couldn't have nicer. Said the best things. He's worn the hat. Trump was right about everything. And I am right about the great, big, beautiful bill. We call it a great, big, beautiful bill because that's what it is. But I'm very disappointed because Elon knew the inner workings of this bill better than almost anybody sitting here, better than you people. He knew everything about it. He had no problem with it. All of a sudden he had a problem, and he only developed the problem when he found out that we're going to have to cut the EV mandate because that's billions and billions of dollars. And when that was cut, and Congress wanted to cut it, he became a little bit different, and I can understand that.
I mean, Donald Trump there, Charles, being relatively restrained, it seems. But he's saying, I don't know why he doesn't like the bill anymore, the great big beautiful bill. I was saying to Tom Slater earlier, isn't it brilliant that actually in sort of historical terms, the bill will be known as the great big beautiful bill?
Yes, and by the way, in the first clip you showed, which was when they were getting along, at the end of that sequence, President Trump gave Musk a gold key to the city, and I suspect that Trump is now changing the locks all over the place.
Yeah, and he talks, and he's a great one for referencing the kind of the small, I suppose, micro criticisms, like, and we asked him if he wanted some makeup for his black eye.
That's right.
Really, really fascinating.
But I tell you, this is a situation where both of these men actually have something to worry about the other. In the case of President Trump, remember that it was Elon Musk's $250 million contribution to Donald Trump's campaign that really did help him win some of the more troublesome states, and more importantly, some of that money went to win congressional seats for Republicans. And if Musk decides to take his money and go home, so to speak, that is going to be a problem, if not for Trump directly, then certainly for some Republicans at the midterm election point. But then as for Elon Musk, he's got a lot at stake in this breakup as well. He's got numerous government contracts, which President Trump has now suggested he might make null and void.
Right.
He has a spaceship that is used by NASA to ferry astronauts to and from the space station, which now Musk is saying he is going to, in effect, take offline. You've got Steve Bannon, who, as you know, is a big supporter of President Trump, who's suggesting that Trump take over SpaceX. I'm not quite sure what the authority would be to do that, but take over the company so that that doesn't happen. This is a total mess.
Yeah.
And as I said at the beginning, in terms of a tabloid type story, a sensational type story, I don't think you can beat this one, can you?
No, I don't think you can. Charles, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. It is a fascinating story. The front page of the Times today, Tom, Musk-Epstein jibe signals the war with Trump. The war of words sort of escalated yesterday after the friendly press conferences that they've had in the past have all melted into insignificance because basically he accused the US leader of appearing, in his words, appearing in the Epstein files.
No, absolutely. And this is really the point at which Elon Musk seems to have salted the earth behind him.
Yeah.
And this is a really out there allegation. He didn't present any evidence, of course. But Elon Musk, he's given to the odd conspiracy theory, and maybe this helps. It makes sense to him why Trump went in a different direction, whether it was on spending, whether it was on certain appointments that Musk was quite keen on. There were some key moments in which Trump decided to go the other way. There have been these kind of two factions within the White House vying for attention, vying for the president's ear, the kind of more populist, sort of working class kind of J.D. Vance faction, and the kind of more tech bro, libertarian, preoccupied with questions like the national debt that Elon Musk was a part of. And I think that has now just kind of spilled out into the open.
But there's no
quite
secret.
Spectacular fashion.
There's no secret that Donald Trump knew Epstein, as many people did, because in fact, as we saw just last week, Peter Mandelson wasn't very happy when he was asked by a Sky reporter, why did you go and spend time at Epstein's house when you knew he was a convicted sex offender, when he was actually in prison at the time? And he said, I don't wish to answer any questions about that. There are pictures of Donald Trump with Epstein, no suggestion that he did anything untoward. Elon Musk also, I think in the last week or so, has admitted that he spent large portions of his time while working with the president and in the White House on ketamine. And you're kind of going, this story's got everything really, isn't it? I mean, here's a guy who is like one of the richest men in the world. He's just revamped his Tesla company, I think, for or an AI company. It's capitalised at something like, $630 billion. He's so wealthy that you can't even imagine how much money he's got. And yet, he's this kind of crazy, cranky, kind of weird guy who takes drugs and has loads of children and, talks about having threesomes with his partners and all the rest of it. And he's now sort of shooting from the hip about the president. It is, as Charles Feldman said, it's the ultimate tabloid story, isn't it?
And he certainly tweets.
Makes reform look really boring.
No, exactly. He certainly tweets like someone who's on ketamine all the time. That makes a lot more sense.
And there's a picture there of Trump with Epstein.
This is the thing about the Epstein issues, because of the fact that clearly there's a lot of people who big questions have to be answered about why they still continue to fraternise with him well after the point it was clear what he was up to. But because of the fact that the thing that Epstein did so successfully was to insinuate himself with very powerful people. And
that was what he was really good at.
Exactly, and to use that information against people in certain cases seems to be the suggestion. It's not a surprise that anyone worth knowing is going to have had a photo with him at some point.
And with people like that, as you know, I mean, I've known people who are in very influential characters and have always got every sort of finger in every pie. One of the things that they do is they get their picture taken with lots and lots of famous other people, because they can then say to other people, I know Donald Trump, there's a picture of me with him, I'll get a meeting organised with you, that kind of thing. It doesn't mean that necessarily anything terrible happened.
No, completely, and that was so clearly the case here, and it seems like they probably had a slightly friendly relationship that just one photograph taken on one particular occasion, but at the same time, it becomes kind of never-ending. At this point, there's so many people who Epstein managed to kind of cozy up to, or at least appear to cozy up to, because that was his sort of stock in trade in a way. So there's any number of people you could cast aspersions or suspicions on by dint of having some loose connection to. So it's a never-ending kind of story in that respect.
It is, absolutely. Let's get a voice note from Craig on Sarah poaching.
Good morning, Mike. This is Craig from Ilkley. The smarter way for Sarah Poaching to have asked that question in PMQs would have been to phrase it around the prohibition of face coverings. It would have then, looped in the burqa as well as balaclavas, people wearing those kind of silly medical masks in public as well. And that they could have just picked up from the Hong Kong government. In 2019, they passed a law which prohibited face coverings in public places. So that would have been the smarter way to have actually asked the question. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Craig, thank you very much indeed. Well, it may have been the smarter way, but I think they deliberately went route one and just said, no, let's not talk about, let's not pretend that we're not talking about the burqa. I said this on the show the other day. I would say to everybody who wears a face covering and walks around the streets of London, get rid of it. If you're wearing a balaclava, if you're running a bike and you're covering your face and all anybody can see is your eyes, what are you doing? Why is that going on? Are you robbing people? Are you stealing watches from people? Are you stealing phones from people? That should be illegal. There's no reason for people to wear masks anymore, and you should be able to say to people, look, if you want to walk the streets of London, we need to see who you are. We need to see your face.
And there's certainly a big epidemic in London of young men seemingly very concerned about their health, wearing those. There's kind of a new form of the surgical mask, but they're all black as well. So they managed to put those just to add the level of sinister. And it's clearly that there's something. Even if people aren't up to no good,
it's menacing, isn't it?
It's a kind of antisocial thing as much as
anything
else.
It's a menacing thing.
Even if they aren't nicking phones and whatnot, it's just there has been this kind of normalisation of people wearing balaclavas and surgical masks to a point where it's getting really out of hand.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I think if they had gone down that road and tried to say, let's remove all face coverings, that wouldn't have quite got the reaction that they wanted to get from Keir Starmer, because they did. Reform got a good reaction from Keir Starmer for their purposes. They got a guy who simply didn't want to address it. And it shows how ridiculous he is.
Couldn't answer the question.
Warwick from Devon says this: morning, Mike and Tom. Great start to your show as usual. Rate Zia Yusuf and the mass hysteria from the left-wingers. Firstly, you need to break a few eggs to make an omelette. And secondly, I would rather have this than a libel MP duffing up a constituent and also libel lying through their teeth on a daily basis. Well, this is true. Absolutely right. Marco from Swindon says, I think the question about the burqa is absolutely legitimate. I think people forget that Sarah said it was in the interest with public safety, which is absolutely true. I mean, if I was held up and robbed at gunpoint by somebody wearing one, there would be about 50,000 prime suspects. How would the police possibly catch them? Brilliant question, in my opinion. Absolutely right. 6:47.
the whole class was being punished for the sins of the one, which we're told not to do that in teacher training college.
Yes, well, as a teacher yourself, exactly.
Yeah, it did seem that the underlying issue here was not so much the inclusivity, but the fact that the girls have been rolling up the skirts. But girls have always done that, and it's the job of teachers to always say, roll them down.
Everyone at my school, I went to a single-sex school, so, you know, and you didn't bother rolling your skirt up during the school hours. The moment we got on that bus, you rolled them up.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:51. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. It's Gaff-prone Fridays, and we play some gaffs throughout the course of the show as well. Tom Slater is here. Let's get a voice note quickly from Laura.
I just wanted to say that today of all days, this useless Labour government and members of preceding Tory governments should be hanging their heads in shame. On the 81st anniversary of the Normandy landings, when so many brave soldiers lost their lives to keep our country free and safe, it is a legitimate question to ask, what on earth was it all for, when we're continuing to allow thousands of young men of fighting age to pour into this country illegally from across the Channel, now outnumbering our standing army by 2 to 1. My father was 19 when he commanded a landing craft at Juno Beach. He would be ashamed. What an utter disgrace. Anyway, great show, Mike.
Laura, thank you very much indeed. It's very good that we should mark that particular anniversary. I got a piece of Telegraph online today. It says, if we do not control our borders, Britain will not exist in the next century. And this is all, you know, feeding into the Matt Goodwin report that came out earlier this week that said that, you know, white British people will be in the minority in our own country in 20 to 30 years' time.
And there's just such a lack of appreciation of how unprecedented the kind of numbers that we've been talking about in terms of immigration. And I think a lot of the anxiety is not necessarily about race or anything like that, but the kind of sense that you know, culture is a fragile thing. And obviously things should change, but I think change that happens from the top down without anyone actually voting for it is change that's always going to be uncomfortable for people, and that's something that people are definitely expressing now through how they're voting and everything.
Yeah, and pages 8 and 9 of The Sun today have got a fascinating spread, return of the stowaways. It says not just boats, migrants are now using lorries again, and they show us back to sort of 2018 over in Calais, when people used to sort of clamber on board lorries that were parked overnight. People didn't seem to know whether they could come safely to Britain without discovering there was a bunch of migrants in the back of their lorries. But it looks as though now, in 2025, it's beginning to happen again. Migrants at a depot yesterday, lorry in France 7 years ago, very many similar parallels. So even if they do start stopping the boats, which I don't think anybody believes they will, there's now people coming on lorries again.
No, exactly. It's really a game of whack-a-mole. Apparently it's up by a quarter from where it was. And this was actually pretty much the main route that people were taking before the small boats thing kicked off, which is a relatively new phenomenon for the UK, the small boats crossing.
And people said that one of the reasons the small boats crossing started was because the sort of fight against the lorry stowaways was actually being won by the authorities.
No, absolutely. So it's a reminder that it's not just about the method, it's about the fact that there is a kind of supply and demand clearly here in terms of smuggling, whether that's via boat, whether that's via lorry, and it's something that you just need to have a proper multi-front approach to if you can actually get on top of this issue, because as soon as you push it down in one area it's going to pop up in another.
Exactly right. There's been a sharp rise, according to The Sun, in attempted illegal lorry crossings in the past year. Figures show 5,874 migrants were detected at ports on the continent, including Calais, Dunkirk and the Channel Tunnel at Coquelles. So, you know, it's the problem is, as we've always said, they're going to keep coming as long as they think there's a reason to come. And as long as you continue to reward people for coming, which is what we're doing basically, by giving them, you know, the opportunity to stay forever, by giving them hotels, by giving them houses, by giving them, you know, benefits in one kind or another, you know, of course it's an attractive proposition. Why wouldn't they come?
No, absolutely. It's that thing where they know, because of how crazy our laws are, because of how crazy our immigration tribunal judges are, that if they manage to just get here, then the likelihood of them actually being removed is so low. And it's also a crazy system, because you're incentivising people to do actually very risky behaviour. Sometimes you've even got children being brought along this route, and whether it's the small boats, whether it's the lorries, people have died trying to make these. You know, it's not a good system that we have if it's actually incentivising and giving people a reason to do this kind of thing. But that is what exists, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately so. Front page of The Sun, a slightly different tack on everything. David Beckham will finally be awarded a knighthood, according to The Sun, an exclusive story. A gong next week for him. The footy legend, who's 50 years old, will become a Sir in the King's birthday honours list next week.
No, it's certainly...
So Posh Spice becomes Lady Beckham.
No, exactly. What a turn up for the books that is. If you just said that 30 years ago, people might have been a little bit surprised. But
tell me what you want, what you really, really want. I'd quite like a knighthood, thanks.
He's certainly been gunning for it for a long time now. You know, I mean, obviously he's a sporting icon. He's just a kind of pop cultural icon. But he's also really been putting in the work to get this knighthood. He became an ambassador for the King's Foundation. Everyone will remember him queuing when the Queen was lying in state, whereas
Philip Schofield lost his job as a result of that, really.
Exactly. And
lost his livelihood, in fact.
For that reason, and for many others, we're probably not going to see a rise Sir Philip Schofield anytime soon. But it's one of those things
Get off your knees.
No, he has been... David Beckham, that is, has been putting in the work that is often required in order to ingratiate yourself. But also, you know, he is certainly someone worthy of recognition, given all of what an ambassador for this country and his sport.
Amazing, isn't it? When you think back to all of those years ago, France '98, which probably you're too young to remember that much.
I do remember it just about.
But you know, people were hanging effigies of him from a lamppost
of course.
because he got sent off against Argentina, and supposedly was the reason why we didn't progress after that incredible sort of Michael Owen scenario. But anyway, I mean, I'm quite a big fan of David Beckham. I think he's done terribly well. They're in the Sunday Times rich list this year, having made from a very small start in the fashion business, her business, which everybody said, oh, it's only being bankrolled by David Beckham. They're now worth about 150 million quid. You know, it's a great British success story. I think we should be, you know, because there are lots of people who go, oh, David Beckham, what's he ever done? You know, because there is that kind of British, you know, let's just, you know, sort of tell everyone who's successful that they shouldn't be. I think he's done very well. So good luck to him.
Absolutely.
Sir David Beckham. I don't mind calling him that. I mean, if Zeke can't get a knighthood, surely to God, you know, David Beckham can. Biggest story of the day for me, which we haven't touched yet. Walking wounded told to stay away from A&E. This is Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, said a raft of changes are going to bring the health service out of the dark ages. They keep promising this. You know, every time somebody tells me they're improving the NHS, I don't believe them, because every time they do that, we get more and more people telling us that actually, I've just had my appointment cancelled. I've been waiting 6 months. I thought I was going to get seen next week. Now they cancelled it again. And he's basically saying, if you are feeling as though you're not in a life-threatening situation, but you just need to be fixed, don't come to the A&E department. Well, where are you supposed to go?
No, and so it seems like they want to set up a kind of halfway house. There'll be a kind of urgent care centre, maybe very close to the A&E, where if what you've got is not life-threatening, but at the same time it's not something that you deal with a GP to go there. But it is going to look like a bit of a slap in the face, because the fact that the reason people are going to A&E oftentimes is because they cannot access care in any other circumstance, and therefore it's kind of picking up the slack left over from GP practices, left over from the other bits along the way. So it's one of those things where it just looks like kind of shaming the public for making the best of what is a very bad situation with the healthcare system.
It really is. And to say to people, because people, unlike you and I probably, actually take notice of government ministers. I don't care what they say and I don't do what they want. But if people say, oh, Wes Streeting says don't go to A&E, people won't go. And they'll go, the government doesn't want me to go, so I should stay home probably and just hope that it'll get better. That's a bad message, surely, isn't it?
Now, anything that is trying to dissuade people away from using the healthcare service, whether it's implicit or explicit, is never good. We saw that with COVID, didn't we? The number of people who should have been accessing that care, could have been accessing that care and didn't, and ended up with much more serious health problems as a consequence. But, it's one of those things when you've got a healthcare system that we have, which is basically based on rationing healthcare and trying to keep people away from doctors as much as possible. level because we haven't got the capacity to deal with them. You end up with all of these kind of slightly unseemly results.
You know, don't go to the doctor if you're ill. You just stay at home. Don't call anybody. You know, don't go to A&E. What are you supposed to do? Absolutely ridiculous. We'll talk more about that, and we'd like to hear your stories as well, of course, because as ever, whenever Wes Streeting speaks, whenever he says he's fixing the NHS, we know that is exactly not what is happening. So we'd love to hear your stories about your experiences with the NHS over the course of the last couple of weeks or couple of months. If you're trying to get an appointment, let us know how that's going. Coming up, Isabel Oakeshott's going to join us. We'll ask her what's going on in reform.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us because, as you know, that's right there. That's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 7. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock when Alex Phillips will be here. It's Friday, the 6th of June. We've reached, yes, indeed, ladies and gentlemen, the end of another fascinating week in the dangerous world of international journalism. Who can remember what happened on Monday? I can tell you exactly what happened on Monday. We were being told that we were on a war footing. We were being told that Russia's attacking us every single day. I know, it seems mad, doesn't it? It seems like ages ago that we were suddenly thinking, are we going to have to run and scramble into a nuclear bunker? Are we going to have to start stockpiling tins of beans? Are we going to have to start worrying about whether we should even travel anywhere in Europe just in case a few missiles happen to rain down on us? Well, everybody seems to have forgotten about that now. The war footing seems to have disappeared altogether. We've got Keir Starmer mumbling and groaning on about trying to work out what to do for the future of the Labour Party. Labour, bizarrely, have actually won a by-election overnight in Hamilton. It is only for a seat in the Scottish Parliament, after all. However, they were supposed supposed to be out of the game. It was meant to be a race between the SNP and Reform. People who know about these things more than I do say it's a very good result for Labour. Obviously, it's a terrible result for the SNP, who lost their seat. It's a pretty good result for Reform, who came third, only 3 or 5% behind the main party that won. And of course, in the new big election in 2026, they will probably get a pretty good standard of list candidates coming in on proportional representation. So considering that the Reform Party was nowhere in Scotland, it's probably done rather well. The Tories, of course, have failed dismally to make any kind of imprint whatsoever. Kemi Badenoch later on today is going to make a sort of keynote speech about what she wants to do for the future of this country, including her wish to leave the ECHR. But I'm going to have to tell you, I've read some of what she's about to say, and she's kind of got a little wrinkle in there which says, we will leave the ECHR if it's advantageous for the country. Well, that's a bit of a get-out clause. We'll talk to Chris Hope about that. Isabel Oakeshot's here as well. The big story on the front page of the Daily Telegraph, Zia Yusuf has left the Reform Party. He's resigned as chairman. There's obviously been some falling out between him and Nigel Farage. I think most Reform voters are taking it with a pinch of salt. But is there more to it than that? We'll ask Isabel what she can tell us. Let's get a voice note from Perry.
Morning, Mike. I'm a little bit upset that Zia's left Reform. I think he was great speaker, great asset to the party. I feel that this country is only one general election away of being completely broken, and that's what will happen if Labour or Conservative get in again. For me, Reform is the only party that gives me hope, and if you haven't got hope, Mike, then you got nothing.
Yeah, it's the hope that kills you, of course. I mean, that's what they used to say. Spurs fans used to say that all the time. Now they finally won a trophy, I suppose. You don't have to worry about that. But lots to talk about this morning, including, of course, Wes Streeting saying, if you're not feeling too ill, but you want to go to A&E, please don't bother, because we don't need to see you because there's too many people coming to A&E. Once again, the NHS being completely and utterly disingenuous, not doing the job that they're supposed to be doing, not doing what it says on the tin. National Health Service is supposed to help people regardless of how ill or not they are. Absolutely ludicrous. Also, we're going to talk about migrants returning to lorries. Not content with coming over here on small boats, they're now going back in stowaways into the lorries. Sun exclusive this morning. 0344 499 1000. It is Friday. Also, we're going to have some gaff for you as well. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Welcome back to A Morning Glory, 6 minutes past 7. Let's not forget, Sean says this. Good morning, Mike. 80 plus years ago, many brave men hit the beaches of Normandy. Let's see how many illegals hit our beaches today. How disrespectful of our governments. Yeah, it's worth remembering that. Let's talk to Isabel Oakeshott, Talk's international editor. Isabel, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
So, I mean, a bit of a surprise overnight. I mean, I'm not going to read too much into it, but Labour winning that by-election in Scotland is not so much the death knell, of Reform. Reform did pretty well as well, we're coming in third. But the death knell for the SNP, you might think.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty interesting result. It's not an area where anyone was ever going to vote Conservative. Let me put it that way. I know the area well. I used to work around there, and it's a tough and an area where there's not an awful lot of privilege, if I can put it that way. Yeah. And so it's probably no surprise that the Tories did very badly. I think that actually, though, the scale of how badly they did, I mean, they damn nearly lost their deposit. They came in crawling in at something like 6% of the vote. So absolutely woeful. The party has essentially disappeared in Scotland, replaced on the right of centre by Reform that came in at 26% of the vote, which is actually not a win. And many people say, well, all that matters is a win. But it's a really interesting sign of direction of travel for Reform there, which has only very, very recently started to actually campaign hard north of the border. As for Labour winning the seat back, historically that would have been a Labour stronghold. I'm talking when I was in political journalism up there in the early 2000s. So, the fact that it's gone from the SNP to Labour, that doesn't really massively surprise me. Of course, Keir Starmer will seize on this as evidence we're all going to need to try to stop our audible groans, as he and his colleagues say that their plan is working, and people are now coming round to seeing just how effective this government is. I'm not really buying that.
Yeah, no, I think absolutely not. It does not in any way. I think the most surprised people, I think, in the whole of the land were the Scottish Labour Party and Anna Sarwar, who I don't think had any clue that they were actually going to somehow win. But let me just ask you to pause for a moment, Isabel. We'll come right back to you, because I want to ask you about what's going on with reform and the resignation of Chairman Zia Yusuf, because I'm just going to take a quick trip down to Westminster. Chris Philp is here, Shadow Home Secretary, speaking to us ahead of a big speech from Kemi Badenoch, which is going to be made a bit later on today, who is going to say, I've always been clear that if our national interest means that we need to leave the ECHR, we will leave. Chris, a very good morning to you. Good to talk to you. I'm assuming that Kemi's willing and able to be criticised by Lord Hermer and called a Nazi for saying that sort of thing.
Well, good morning, Mike. Yes, ironically, she's giving the speech in the very room where Lord Hermer made those disgraceful comments a few weeks ago, where Keir Starmer's best buddy, Lord Hermer, smeared his political opponents, people on the right, like me and Kemi. He called us Nazis for questioning the ECHR, which is a ridiculous and disgusting slur, and quite frankly, Keir Starmer should sack this man Hermer as quickly as possible. Hermer is also, by the way, the man who is behind he's an enthusiastic cheerleader for the Chagos Islands giveaway, and he should. And he also, by the way, recently refused to refer to the Court of Appeal a rapist who was sentenced to only 28 months in prison. Hermer could have referred that case to the Court of Appeal for a longer sentence, and he refused to. So on every level, this man, Lord Hermer, is a disgrace, and he should be fired. But I'm not sure Starmer has the guts to do it, because this man, Lord Hermer, is Starmer's long-standing mate, and frankly, they probably share quite a few views.
Yes, I think absolutely right. So Kemi's speech today, I mean, I was talking to a couple of people in the business last night, if you like, the business of politics, who said, why is she making it on a Friday where it's not going to have as much impact perhaps as it would have on another day? The papers tomorrow will be full of all sorts of, Saturday sort of type stories. I've been in this media business for a long time. Saturday's not the greatest time for it to land as an impactful kind of speech. Why today?
Well, I'm not sure about the timing. It sounds like we need to hire you, Mike, as a media advisor. But look, the important point here is the substance, and the substance is that we cannot allow the Strasbourg court or domestic courts, in the way they interpret the European Convention on Human Rights, the ECHR, to stop the democratically elected government and parliament of this country doing what the public want us to do, whether that's protecting veterans, whether it's getting infrastructure projects built, whether it's dealing with oil and gas drilling, and particularly whether it's to do with immigration and making sure we can kick out not just some foreign criminals, but every foreign criminal, making sure that if somebody enters this country illegally, we can remove everybody who does that, not just some people, but everybody who attempts to enter the country illegally. And we are increasingly of the view that we need to leave the ECHR in order to do that. That is what Kemi is going to be talking about today. Now, we've asked one of the country's most eminent barristers, Lord Wolfson, to take about 3 or 4 months, so not very long, 3 or 4 months, to look at the practical details of that, to look at how it would work in practice, to identify any potential pitfalls and how they can be overcome, to look at what leaving would and would not allow us to do, just to make sure we thought this through properly. We don't want to shoot from the hip and just make stuff up like Reform do. We want to do this seriously and properly, so we're going to take that 3 or 4 months to go through the details and then make a final announcement in the autumn. We're doing this seriously, but we're doing it to make sure that our democratically elected parliament, that you might be able to see in the shot behind me, makes the decisions about how this country is run, not judges in Strasbourg, but also domestically, who have been stretching beyond recognition those articles that were written, ECHR articles that were written 70-odd years ago, 75 years ago. They stretched them beyond common sense, beyond recognition. And if it stops our democratic parliament doing what the public want, that is obviously not acceptable.
No. You say you don't want to do what Reform do, but what Reform are doing seems to be very popular. They're leading in every poll that you can see. They didn't win the election in Hamilton last night, but they are generally considered to have done pretty well to come third, beating the Tories into 4th place. Tories are in 4th place in a lot of situations. I mean, a lot of people are saying to me, can the Tories actually survive over the next 2 to 3 years before the next general election?
Well, I believe obviously we can, and I think the point of difference between us and in particular Reform, who you've mentioned, is that, look, they just shoot from the hip, they just say stuff, the first thing that comes into their heads. You know, the party is a bit of a one-man personality cult. And look, I'll grant Nigel Farage this, he is charismatic, but it is a one-man personality cult. We saw their chairman, Mr. Yusuf, resign yesterday in chaos. You know, they fell out with Rupert Lowe, a respected figure, I would say. They kicked him out, effectively kicked him out just a few months ago. It's not really a serious party. They say whatever comes into their head, the first thing that comes into their head. And look, I know that is superficially attractive, but it's not a way to run a country. If you look at what Nigel Farage has been saying on tax and welfare recently, you know, he promised loads and loads of tax cuts and increased benefits, which add up to well over £100 billion. Now, look, I'm the first person to want tax cuts, believe me, but you do have to make sure the numbers add up. Otherwise, it ends up being sort of Liz Truss on steroids, and it will end up having a huge problem. So he says stuff without thinking it through properly. And while it does make for good headlines, and it does sound good, when it gets properly examined, it doesn't really stack up. It won't work. And I think as he gets more scrutiny and as the public, you know, think about it a bit more carefully, that'll become apparent. But it is up to us as Conservatives to win back trust, and that is, you know, a challenge, because obviously we
that's the thing, because
the last election,
you know,
we need to win back trust. So let me finish my point. We need to win back trust by, like, today is the really important part of that, because we're showing we understand we've got to stop illegal immigration completely. We've got to kick out all foreign criminals, but we're going to figure out a proper plan, a thoughtful plan that's actually going to work. We're not just going to come out with some superficially attractive sounding slogan, which is what Nigel does.
Well, Chris, you say that, but I mean, I think people have lost faith in the main two parties. One, because you didn't do what you said you were going to do. The Labour government are the same. They didn't do what they said they were going to do. They're making a complete dog's breakfast of everything that they touch. Everything. There's a poll this morning where nobody believes that anything that they're doing on any major issue is working. They're failing on every major issue. People don't believe politicians anymore because they don't do what they say. And at the end of the day, Nigel Farage, you know, has done what he says. And, you know, if he gets into power, as he has done in some local councils, we'll see how that goes. But listen, Chris, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Chris Philp, Shadow Home Secretary there, as usual, as a Tory former minister, having a go at Reform for coming up with things that they don't actually think about or think through. I'm not sure that's anything that's going to wash with the general public, particularly not with Reform voters. Let's go back to Isabel Oakeshott. Isabel, very good morning. You know, it's the usual song and dance, isn't it, from the Tories? You know, we're going to bring back the trust. Well, they're not, because nobody trusts them.
Oh, my God. I listened to that with absolute open mouth. I mean, the arrogance. I don't know Chris Philp. He seems like a nice guy. But the absolute jaw-dropping arrogance of standing there criticising and depicting Reform as a personality cult, as a one-man band, when the party is literally way ahead in the polls, despite only having really got underway a couple of years ago and really has made quite astonishing progress. And then to go on to say, we're going to take our time over this, we're going to come up with a plan. They had 14 years. This isn't a new problem. You know, the issue around the ECHR has been around for at least 10 years as a prominent topic for discussion. I remember very vividly listening to Theresa May talking about it when she was Home Secretary, before she even became Prime Minister of the leading the Tory party. So it is truly unbelievable that the Tories still think they need to think about whether or not to leave the ECHR. The public have lost patience long ago with the Tories supposedly deliberating over whether to leave the ECHR. It is crystal clear that it is the only way we are going to be able to take back control of our borders, along with other measures that the Tories manifestly failed to take.
And of course she still leaves herself with a sort of a get out clause, because at the start of the speech she's going to say, I've always been clear that if our national interest means that we need to leave the ECHR, we will leave. I mean, she said this to me in an interview before she became leader. It's hardly breaking news. You know, the idea that she says, if it's in the national interest, we will leave. Well, that means that you can easily say, well, we've decided it's actually not in the national interest that we should leave, so we're not going to leave. So where's the news? And the idea that Chris Philp is surprised that on a Saturday people may not want to be that interested in the Leader of the Opposition's great speech about leaving an international, court of law, I find that staggering.
Well, indeed, you and I are both journalists, and it's a sort of first page of the book, isn't it?
Yeah.
Understanding what happens on different days of the news cycle.
Yeah.
I just thought that was unbelievable. This line from the Tories on the back of the departure of Zia Yusuf, that the Reform Party is some kind of, personality cult or fan club for Nigel Farage. Well, I totally reject that, but at least they've got fans, whereas at the moment, the Tory party, Kemi Badenoch, basically doesn't have any fans. I mean, she's struggling to hold on to her own leadership. Literally no one in the Conservative Party, apart from perhaps Kemi herself, believes that she will be in her job much more than a year from now, and that's if she's lucky. So perhaps she's jealous that Nigel Farage actually has some fans.
Yeah, well, indeed. And let me ask you about the whole Zia Yusuf story, because obviously the Telegraph have made it their front page story this morning. Civil war over Burka ban is what they call it. I watched Nigel speaking last night about it, and he seemed very calm and measured, and maybe not unlike the situation with Rupert Lowe. He's just said, look, he's obviously had enough. We know, and you know better than anybody, there's a lot of pressure when you're working for an organisation like Reform. It's very, very hard work. But is there more to this than meets the eye, I suppose, is the question? Because in his farewell tweet, he says, I no longer believe working to get a Reform government elected is a good use of my time, which seems a bit disingenuous, really, to me.
So I wouldn't read too much into that final sentence. I mean, I think it is a good use of my time. That the emphasis is on that. He no longer wants to give 18 hours a day unpaid work to this mission. I don't believe that he doesn't believe that he has lost faith in the mission. I am sure that he is full square behind the campaign to get Reform into government, but suspect that quite simply he doesn't think it's for him to do anymore. And frankly, I understand that. The guy is an absolute workaholic. I think he's shattered physically, he's exhausted. And I think that this was actually not about the Burka ban question. That is not why Zia Yusuf has left the party for the time being, or left his role in the party. I think that was a catalyst, because I think he took a whole load of grief on social media and on any number of other channels over. I think he was a little blindsided by it. That was a communications failure. And I think it's been really, really rough for him, and he is a businessman. In the end, he's very inexperienced politically. People like Nigel Farage, Richard Tice, and other figures in the party, Lee Anderson, have been doing this for years, and they are very, very resilient to the brickbats and all the stuff that gets thrown at you. But when you're relatively new, and he is, and he adapted to it brilliantly, it's absolutely brutal. Especially when you're doing really well, because that's when the heat really comes on.
Absolutely right. And so, I mean, as I say, Nigel Farage didn't seem terribly fazed by it last night, but he seemed as though he was slightly taken by surprise. Was there any indication that Zia was going this way? Because people had been saying before that, a couple of days earlier, that he's been sort of shoved to the sidelines, put into the Doge department of sorting out Kent County Council and Sheffield and all the rest of it, which he seemed to be taking on with some gusto. He was already making inroads and discovering all sorts of wastage that has been going on. So, I mean, that is also quite an important question for me as well. Who takes over that job now? Because the guy who was also appointed, Nathaniel, whatever his name is, I keep forgetting, Freed, he's gone as well.
Well, I wouldn't worry about that, because there are a lot of people crawling all over that, and it's a really, really important task for Reform. We've got to be able to, the party has got to be able to show that it is going to run and will run these 10 councils very, very differently to the way in which they've been run before, and nobody at HQ is under any illusion about the importance of that task. I think this has actually been brewing for quite a while with Zia Yusuf. As parties grow, and the pace of growth for Reform has been quite astonishing, naturally people find their niche, their different fortes and so on. And Nigel indicated yesterday on the airwaves that there'd been a few sort of difficulties internally with management style, that perhaps Zia had rubbed a few people up the wrong way. when people are on a mission, they can be pretty single-minded, they can be pretty laser focused on it, and sometimes that doesn't always lead to motherhood and apple pie. Zia was trying very, very hard to achieve something extremely difficult, and a few people probably were a little bit had their feathers ruffled, if I can put it that way. But nobody wanted him to leave in this manner.
No. What about his successor? Who's going to be the next chairperson, chairman, woman, whatever?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. It's a really, really difficult job. You've got to be able to do the media bit, which, as we've just been discussing, is no picnic. But also there's so much operational stuff, which is frankly really tedious and challenging. And you've got people messaging you, 24/7 with the minutiae of who's fallen out with who in some petty kind of internal thing in one of the branches in Berkshire. This is the level of it, and this is what he did so well. It is really, really thankless. You will not believe the petty stuff that comes to you, even in that lofty position. And not many people want to take that role on.
No. I mean, I can't imagine wanting to do something like that either. It's an incredible scene. But again, reform leading the news every single day this week, regardless. And I said just a couple of moments ago, can you believe that only on Monday that Keir Starmer was putting us on a war footing, expecting us to have World War III with Russia? It seems so long ago that it's not even important.
Yeah, I'd actually forgotten it. But I would say, look, this will blow over just as the Rupert Lowe thing blew over. If the Tories and Labour think that just because Zia Yusuf has stepped aside, that reform is somehow going to disintegrate, then they are absolutely on cloud cuckoo land.
Yeah, I think that's right. Isabel, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Have a good weekend. Isabel Oakeshott, Talks International editor there. Let's get a voice note from Heb on Sarah poaching.
Good morning, Mr. Mike. It's Hev from Kent. Yeah, as regards to Sarah poaching and her question to the so-called Prime Minister, I can't see what the problem was. I have no idea why Zia Yusuf would have to call it a dumb question, because it was a straightforward question. It wasn't as if she put across her own opinion and then asked the Prime Minister, does he agree with me, like most of them do. She just asked a straightforward question.
Yeah, a very straightforward question and a very good question. And the fact that Keir Starmer couldn't answer it, didn't want to answer it, tells you everything you need to know about the man. But let's go back just 4 days, OK? Just 4 days ago. Do you remember Monday? Do you remember what was going on Monday? Do you remember how Keir Starmer tried to put the willies up everybody? Check it out.
And today, following through on this review, I want to set out 3 fundamental changes that we're going to deliver. First, we are moving to warfighting readiness as the central purpose of our armed forces. When we are being directly threatened by states with advanced military forces, the most effective way to deter them is to be ready. And frankly, to show them that we're ready.
A fundamental war-fighting readiness. What's he talking about? It's Friday now and nothing's happened, right? We haven't seen any drones. Nobody's tried to kidnap anyone. We haven't seen any sort of, hostile activity in the seas, have we? Apart from, of course, the usual migrants coming. We've not seen any Russians. Have you seen any Russians hanging about the street corner? Good afternoon, comrade. We are here to take your house and to take your children, yes. Combat readiness. What's he talking about? Has he gone mad? What a complete and utter plonker. Rodney! This is Talk.
Zia Yusuf has been, at best, David Cameron with diversity body armour. He keeps talking about British values, about being able to actually define them. He seems to have had a softening effect on the party from within regarding its immigration policy. Before the election, Nigel Farage had a great interview with Trevor Phillips where he pointed to the Henry Jackson Society polling that said lots of British-born Muslims don't think Hamas did anything wrong on October 7th. That's a real issue for integration. And then a few months after the election victory, he told Winston Marshall, well, we can't politically alienate all of Islam or we will lose.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
7:31, welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. Great show this week, Mike. Could you ask Mr. Streeting or the next libel plank you interview how much will we all be receiving as a rebate for not using the hospitals that we pay for? Says Stephen Kimberley, Nottinghamshire. Well, that's a very good question. You know, we're being told all the time, aren't we? Don't go to the doctor because, you know, he's very busy, the doctor. He's seeing people who are not very well. You know, don't, for heaven's sake, go to A&E if you can walk, basically. The walking wounded, they're calling them. Shouldn't go to A&E. You should only go to A&E if you're basically on the brink of dying. Well, surely by then it's a bit late, isn't it? Because then they're trying to save your life as opposed to just fix you up and send you back on your way. There's a problem in the NHS. It doesn't work. And nothing that Wes Streeting says he's going to do will make any bleeding difference. We want to hear your stories this morning about the NHS because, as I said yesterday, a friend of mine who's been waiting for an eye operation has had it cancelled for the second time in the last 6 months. People tell me all the time that they get their operations cancelled. The lies that come out of the Labour government about cutting down the waiting list, it's all rubbish. It's not happening. People are still having to call up GPs at 8:30 in the morning and try and get a race to actually get an appointment, because if you don't make it through that particular log jam, you end up waiting for months and months and months to be seen by your own GP. It's complete and utter madness. Let's talk to Andrew Motford, Director of Net Zero Watch, of course, because there's more to talk about when it comes to net zero. Kemi Badenoch hasn't quite decided whether she wants net zero or not. The Tories can't seem to decide whether they want to keep it, keep bits of it, keep some of it, have loads of it. They don't really know. But net zero has basically tripled electricity prices over the last 30 years, according to a new report. So let's find out from Andrew. When is anyone going to actually see the light here, Andrew? Very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. Yeah, I think the Conservatives seem to be working their way round to opposing net zero, but it's not quick. You know, they've said it's impossible by 2050, which is absolutely true. I'd go further and say it's impossible, full stop. Unless somebody comes up with some miracle technology to deliver it at a price we can afford. But yeah, there is only Reform out there who are absolutely clear that, you know, we're just not going to do it and we're going to cancel it.
Right.
I think the interesting thing about this report is that it does highlight how much money it is costing us. It focuses very much on the electricity system, but I think we have to remember that net zero is also costing us in other ways. You know, the government are spending huge amounts on net zero. So, you know, there's a government expenditure cost that the people, ordinary households, are having to fund as well, and that's going to be well over £10 billion a year on top of 15-16 billion pounds a year of subsidies and inefficiencies in the electricity system, and there's things like tax breaks to green things as well that's costing us money as well, and it really adds up. If we cancel net zero, we can put a huge amount of money back
Yes.
into, if you like, the productive parts of the economy.
But this is one of the things that's infuriating, isn't it, about the two main parties, the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, who keep accusing Nigel Farage of coming up with fantasy economics and saying, you know, he says he's going to save all this money and he's going to give us tax breaks and he's going to raise the threshold to 20,000 for income tax and all of that. But he can't afford to do it. And whenever you say, you know, he can afford to do it, he says that he's going to cancel net zero. They all go, yeah, but his numbers on net zero are nothing like the reality of net zero, which I think means that they're being very disingenuous. Because looking at some of the figures that I've got in front of me, you know, energy subsidies are locked in, leading to projected consumer cost increases of 20% by 2030, up to more or less £16 billion. Combined with carbon taxes, they now account for 25% of domestic electricity bills compared to what it used to be, which was only 14%. And there's all sorts of subsidies not only being given to people through your electricity bill, but also people being handed out money by GB Energy, people being given grants to develop, you know, North Sea, you know, wind farm fields and all the rest of it. You know, so the cost of net zero on an annual basis is far more than just that 16 billion in the first place, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think in terms of reaching Reform's idea of increasing the amount of tax-free allowance, if you like, to 20,000, I think that is going to be a struggle because, yeah, obviously, subsidies to wind farms are levies on bills, not public spending. So that, you know, that is going to be difficult to achieve. I think if they really want to do that, they're probably going to have to look at the benefits system in a serious way, which, you know, frankly needs doing anyway.
Right.
But the amount of money that we can save consumers through their bills is absolutely enormous. And, you know, at the moment we have this huge burden of net zero on the whole economy. It is holding everything back. And, you know, if we do away with it, then, you know, I think we will move off this sort of downward spiral of the economy, which is frankly very worrying now. And we can reverse that. We can go back to a virtuous spiral, if you like, where things get better and better. Business starts to grow, the tax take grows, and we can start to remove further burdens from consumers. The idea that this is some sort of a fantasy is, I mean, the fantasy is coming from Ed Miliband.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I mean, he's spending, as you mentioned, he's spending, you know, £20 billion he wants to put into carbon capture, which is a technology that basically doesn't yet exist. It's on the drawing board. There is no carbon capture equipped gas-fired power station anywhere in the world. Nobody's ever got it to work. But Miliband says he's going to spend £20 billion on it. I mean, this is insane. This is complete fantasy. And this is the problem that has afflicted the country for 2 decades now. We have politicians who are essentially dealing with fantasy rather than hard numbers and facts.
Yes, and then immediately they accuse other people of that. Exactly right. Andrew, we've got to run. Thank you very much indeed for talking to us, Director of Net Zero Watch. The other amazing story that we came across actually last night, which I put out on my Twitter feed, is that European countries have blamed EU environmental regulations for hindering their preparations for defending against a possible Russian invasion, right? Because apparently they've been telling all the European countries you can't do any sort of proper war gaming, you can't do any proper, you know, sort of manoeuvres. You should do them virtually, because that way you save a load of emissions. So they've all been doing it on computers. Meanwhile, the Russians are sort of, you know, flogging them, flying and fleeing and running into the spaces that they should have been defending. We, of course, are at a war footing, as you might remember from Monday. Have a look. No, we're not on a war footing. We can't even make the computers work. How are we going to fight the Russians? You know, nothing works in this country. It's 7:39.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:41. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Mark says this, and nobody believes Kemi will leave the ECHR and brackets loophole. Nobody trusts the Conservatives or even cares what they say. And I think that's a big problem for her. And Janet says from Newcastle, so Mike, how can illegal immigrants be arrested when they come in on the back of a lorry, but not when they come in by boat? Well, apparently one of the things that does happen to them is that when they do get off the boat and they walk up the beach and they go into the arms of Border Force, they do actually technically get arrested. But they then get taken away from having been arrested and fingerprinted and supposedly swabbed, apparently, for DNA and all that. They get then taken to a hotel. So the system doesn't work quite as well. Let's get a voice note from Trevor.
Hi there, Mike. Hope you're keeping well. Trevor here from Norwich. Enjoying the show as always. Just a quick chip in about Zia Yusuf's resignation. Look, I'm no big fan of Rupert Lowe. I don't think he's a team player for reform. Well, he certainly came out not that way. But when Zia Yusuf made the allegations to police about Rupert Lowe, and the police subsequently said, well, there wasn't enough evidence here, that was really the moment Zia Yusuf should have resigned. It showed to me it was a kind of snap decision under pressure. It was a slightly immature decision to go to the police about the subject, especially when you don't have the evidence to back you up. It showed to me that Zia Yusuf was not cut out for the role and that he crumbled under immense pressure.
Yeah, very interesting stuff, says Trevor. Great show, says Paul. Maybe Suella Braverman could be the next Reform chairman. Go all out for her, Nigel, he says. Let's talk now, though, to Lucy White from the Centre for Migration Control, because we've seen the Kemi Badenoch speech. We've had a peek at it. She's going to be speaking later on about leaving the ECHR. She's talking about, cracking down on immigration in a way, of course, that the Tory government said that they would do when they were in power. To be fair, I suppose, Lucy, a very good morning to you. They were stymied, weren't they, an awful lot of the time by Labour, by the opposition and by the courts and by lefty lawyers who seem to have all disappeared now into the ether now that Keir Starmer suddenly decided that immigration is a bad thing.
Yeah, good morning, Mike. It's great to be here on Talk this morning. I think crucially the main point we have to think about is why is Kemi Badenoch reviewing leaving the ECHR? This should just be a no-brainer. You should just leave it without the need to review it.
Yes, and also she's kind of leaving herself a little get-out clause, isn't she? Because she's saying that she will leave the ECHR if it's in the benefit of the country, if it's in the good for the country, which kind of tells me that she's not actually committing to doing it. And if this is the big takeaway from her speech, she basically said the same thing to me months and months ago when I interviewed her before she became the leader. So it's not exactly breaking news, this, is it?
No, and I also think it's quite irrelevant. I think by the time of the next general election, she certainly will not be the next Tory leader. Yeah. I think it will be Robert Jenrick, who is absolutely committed to leaving the ECHR. And quite fundamentally, if you look at Article 3 of the ECHR, which is that it prohibits torture or inhumane or sort of punishment or bad treatment of these criminals, it's just ludicrous. So we have stories where our activist woke judges in the UK have blocked a paedophile being deported to Pakistan because he could be persecuted as an alcoholic in Pakistan. We've had stories where a Nigerian criminal was stopped from being deported because he believed that he was possessed.
Yes.
And then we've had a rapist.
That's my favourite, that one.
Yeah, a crazy Nigerian who thinks he's possessed can't go back to Nigeria because he might be poorly treated. And there's another one by this activist woke judge called Hugo Norton Taylor. You see, we need to start calling out these judges that are blocking these lunatics from leaving our country.
Yeah.
So Hugo Norton Taylor prevented a rapist who was preying upon a woman asleep in Glasgow. He prevented him from being deported to Afghanistan because the Taliban might be too harsh on him.
Yeah.
Well, quite frankly, I think the Taliban should be quite harsh.
Exactly right. Why should we care? If somebody commits those kinds of awful sex crimes in this country, they serve their time, they should be sent home. It's as simple as that. I don't give stuff whether or not they're going to be persecuted or even executed in their home country for being paedophiles or for being rapists, you know, and that's their bad luck. You shouldn't be a rapist or a paedophile, you know, sorry.
But in addition to leaving the ECHR, we must repeal the Human Rights Act, because this effectively enshrines the ECHR into our domestic law. So there's one step to leave the ECHR, but we must go further and repeal the Human Rights Act. And just another point, Mike, I think it's really crucial that we remind ourselves that it costs £40,000 a year to have a prisoner in our prisons. So each one of these foreign criminals are costing us £40,000 a year. And most importantly is, why should a foreign court in Strasbourg in France be dictating our decisions to deport migrants?
Yeah.
So it was the ECHR, along with the Human Rights Act, that prevented the Rwanda planes from deporting illegals to Rwanda. And quite frankly, you know, this is not in our country's national interest. So we must keep the ECHR. And as I say, quite frankly, Kemi Badenoch absolutely will not be Tory leader by the time of the next general election. It will be Jenrick.
Yeah.
And if the Tories have any hope of recovering from their, you know, they're essentially a dead party at this point in time. If they have any glimmer of hope, they have to get Jenrick in as leader.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think a lot of people would agree. And that may be the only thing that will save them. Lucy, good to talk to you. Sorry we're a bit short of time today. We'll get you on again to explore some more of the migration business, because The Sun today on pages 8 and 9 saying that they've now returned to not just coming over on the boats, coming over now back in lorries. Return of the stowaways is what it says. Thousands of people have been found to have been travelling to the UK, trying to travel to the UK in the back of lorries, stowing away from Calais, coming across on ferries. They're back. They will find any way to come here as long as we continue to reward them for doing so. 0344 499 1000. Peter says this: good morning, Mike. Reform is still in the process of growing and maturing into a viable political party worthy of governing. Any inner disruption is welcomed by other parties who are terrified of reform. Reform have plenty of time to formulate their plans for government, and that's what the others are scared of. And so they should be scared after the awful mess the current government in particular have made of this country. I couldn't agree with you more. Coming up, we're going to talk about the dreadful state of our water companies. This is Talk.
Betty had found out that she wasn't going to get the £300 winter fuel allowance that she relied on to keep her home warm and to heat herself through the cold months. So you went round, as you did every day, and you found her literally frozen to death. Unbelievable.
Dharma said about the last government before he got in,
that Tories would say that there's 4,000 people going to die of the cold this winter. Well, he's beat that target by 4,950.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:52. Reform and its chairman, says Bill in Cheshire. His departure isn't a big deal. Growing pains of a small new party. Reform's future is entirely dependent on how they run their councils and how well they do in next May's local elections. If they do well, they will be potential general election winners. End of. I think that's probably right. And Mike Graham says, Lorraine, via Zia Yusuf, it is absolutely right that Zia has stepped down from Reform. You cannot tolerate such blatant derogatory comments towards Sarah, who has earned her place as an MP. At least Reform have shown they will not tolerate such behaviour towards their female MP. Keir Starmer needs to follow suit and resign. His treatment of women MPs is appalling. Well, listen, I mean, lots of you have got plenty of things to say about this. Many Reform members will be very happy this morning. This is a positive step forward, says Lisa. There's not many people saying that there's a problem for Zia Yusuf leaving Reform. Many of you are saying, actually, it's a good thing. Did Farage fire Zia over his insults to Sarah Pochin, says Anna in Surrey. Reform could not withstand losing another very popular member of Parliament, but can easily replace Yusuf. Interesting. Now, we were talking about Kemi Badenoch just before and about her speech this afternoon in which she's going to say, I want to leave the ECHR only if it's good for the country. When I interviewed her last October, here's what she said to me.
The system is broken in so many areas. Immigration is one of them. And I keep saying that if we left the ECHR today, we would not be deporting any more people because the people who are responsible for it don't want to do this job. I've met many Home Office officials. They're lovely people. They want to look after refugees. They want to help asylum seekers, and that's great. Go and work in a charity that does that.
Yeah.
Leaving the ECHR means that they just find something else. They just find something else to use as an excuse.
So she wanted to leave the ECHR back in October. Now she wants to leave the ECHR if it's good for the country, which is a slightly less sure way of doing it, isn't it? Let's talk to Kat Hobbs, though, now. Water companies back in the news because they're so useless, they're so bad. Pollution in the waterways of our country, in the rivers, in the seas, in the lakes, in the waterways around the country. It's all terrible. Thames Water Chief Executive Chris Weston has been quizzed on his bonus. We'll have a look at that first, shall we?
Please, I have said everything to the committee for the last 2 hours.
You're in a public-facing role, and customers deserve an explanation because they've been treated very badly. They're facing huge bills. You've got plenty of money. Give them an explanation.
What do you want an explanation of?
How the company got to this point, how you're going to save it, how can you change culture when you're still taking big bonuses?
There are a lot of questions in there. I have answered all of those questions for the committee. I am absolutely sure that we will save the company and we will sort it out and we'll improve its operations and we will restructure its balance sheet so there is less debt and performance will improve over time. But this is going to take 5 to 10 years. And I'm sorry it's taking so long, but that is the reality of the situation.
Do you want to say sorry?
I said I'm sorry that the service that the customers receive, it's not where we would like it to be. Everyone is very committed in Thames to trying and sort it out. So absolutely, I'm sorry of the service some people receive, but it will absolutely get fixed.
Yeah, Chris Weston, the Chief Executive of Thames Water, also had to apologise later because it turned out that he misled the Select Committee when he talks about how the bonuses were arrived at. So I wouldn't trust a word that man said, to be honest. Kat Hobbs is here, founder of We Own It. Kat, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
I don't know how you get a job running a water company, but it seems to me that it's a pretty cushy number if you can get in there. You don't have to bother about doing your job. You don't have to worry about actually delivering what you promised to deliver. You just take a massive, great big bonus and screw everything up.
That's right. It's an incredibly cushy number. They're getting these bonuses on top of salaries that are around 2 to 3 million a year. The thing is, though, we're looking at the wrong man there. That is not the man who can save Thames Water.
Right.
The man who can save Thames Water is Steve Reed, the Environment Secretary, because he is the one who can take Thames Water into public ownership. And right now, you might have seen that KKR has withdrawn its bid.
Yes.
So Thames Water is in a complete state right now. There's a complete vacuum. And what we're saying to government is, now is your moment to take Thames Water into public ownership, bring it in line with the rest of the world. 9 out of 10 countries run water in public ownership. 4 out of 5 people in the country want us to run water in public ownership. And no wonder when you look at the mess that we're in, because we've tried to pretend that water is something that you can have a market in. Everybody knows that's not true. And the government's only excuse for not doing this is the cost. Well, it actually, in the case of Thames Water, if Steve Reed used his powers, he could cut Thames Water's debt by around half. That's according to the Treasury and JP Morgan. Shareholders are already saying they don't want to be part of it. What is it going to take for the Environment Secretary to bring this company into public ownership? And when we're looking at the rest of the water companies, this story today, frankly, it's just tinkering around the edges. It's really quite farcical because we're talking about banning bonuses. Well, the water bosses have already said they are just going to increase salaries.
Yeah.
These salaries that are already incredibly high. If you don't think that water bosses should be getting bonuses when the water companies fail to perform, then you probably shouldn't also think that the shareholders around the world are going to be getting their dividends when the companies fail to perform.
Yeah.
Well, the companies are failing to perform, so why are the shareholders getting dividends? And if you follow that through to its logical conclusion, which 82% of us have, you say, well, we shouldn't have privatisation at all. And this experiment that we've had since 1989 has been a complete failure.
Yeah. But I guess the argument against taking it into public ownership, and I'm not against taking it into public ownership, but one of the arguments against it might be, can we afford to do that? Because presumably it must be quite an expensive thing to run a water company. It must need quite a lot of investment. And if you haven't got investment from the private sector, i.e. shareholders and, possibly other investors who are, corporate investors and pension funds even as well, where do you get the money from?
Well, they're not investing. So every penny of investment that we've had since privatisation started has come from your bills, my bills, everyone's bills. So we're the ones paying for every penny of investment. These shareholders wouldn't be in this game if they didn't think they could make more money than they put in. And that's exactly what they've done. They've extracted money, £76 billion in dividends since privatisation started. They've built up a debt mountain in order to fund those dividends, essentially a Ponzi scheme. They've extracted that money at our expense with us paying. And so the way that you do this is you say, OK, the government's saying that it's expensive. The only reason it would be expensive is because the market value of these companies is higher than it should be. Why is it higher than it should be? Because it's based on this huge rip-off that's going on. It's based on the continuation of us being ripped off. And they've had to fund that rip-off by increasing our bills just recently by 35%.
Oh, I know. It's insane.
In a year when it's a 10-year high for sewage in England.
Yeah, it's absolutely unbelievable. Kat, listen, great to talk to you. We'll have to do this again. Founder of We Own It, saying that ludicrous, isn't it? That the big thing today, the big news on the water company front is that water companies have been banned from paying unfair bonuses to senior executives because the government have said it's not acceptable. But of course, as usual, the government have left a massive gaping great hole through which a coach and horses can be driven because they're all just going to give each other bigger salaries. That's the problem. We're talking about the NHS coming up in the next hour. One here from somebody who said the NHS is useless. In 2017, I fell over and seriously injured my ankle and was taken to A&E. Later, I was told I needed an operation. I was then bounced around different parts of the NHS for 5 years before finally getting the operation. Walking on it for that long made things even worse, and my foot has not been the same since. I argued with so many doctors in that time. The NHS is an absolute joke. Well, so it is. Wes Streeting says if you've got any kind of injury that means you can walk around, don't go to the A&E to get it fixed. Try and get an operation done somewhere else. Try and get seen by a doctor. Well, good luck with that. This is Morning Glory. We'll be back right after the news.
is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix?
Well, it is something that shouldn't be said. It is not right. A woman is an adult female, and the court has made that absolutely clear. I actually welcome the judgment because I think it gives real clarity. It allows those that have got to draw up guidance to be really clear about what that guidance should say.
If you want to fight for Remain, vote Labour.
Now, there are some who say we don't need Brexit to work. We need to reverse it. I couldn't disagree more. Day after day, there are new allegations of sleaze, of favours, of privileged access. And it's all very well the Prime Minister saying, well, say now, well, I'm paying for it.
You've decided to repay £6,000 worth of gifts.
Lord Ali is facing an investigation. I wonder how concerned you are that your biggest donor was not fully transparent.
Are you saying you made a mistake? It was right for me to make those repayments. Thank you. Of course, I wouldn't want Donald Trump round for dinner, but don't underestimate the danger to the world if Trump is re-elected this time around. I'm anti-Trump. I would like to send my warmest congratulations to President Trump on his inauguration as the 47th President of the United States.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, coming up to 4 minutes past 8. It is Friday the 6th of June. Yes, indeed, people, we have reached the end of yet another incredible week. A week when, from the beginning of it, we weren't too sure exactly what was going to happen, because let's not forget, the Prime Minister of this great country of ours actually got up and said that we might be going into war with Russia. Have a listen to this.
We are moving to war-fighting readiness. When we are being directly threatened by states with advanced military forces, the most effective way to deter them is to be ready. And frankly, to show them that we're ready.
We don't seem to be talking about war with Russia anymore. I mean, that was only 4 days ago. This government changes its sort of tack on so many different things so quickly. This morning we've got Wes Streeting talking about don't go to the A&E if you've got anything wrong with you, unless you're dying, in which case do go to the A&E and they'll try and save your life. But basically otherwise you'll clog it up. Don't mess with the NHS. They're not interested in you unless you've literally got one leg hanging off or you're, going into renal failure or something. Don't bother going there. Go and find some other way to get yourself treated, for heaven's sake. What's wrong with you? You pay your taxes. Why should you expect to go to a hospital? Forget about it. We haven't got enough ambulances for you anyway. Amazing. 0344 499 1000. The front page is all very different this morning. A rise to Bex, it says on the front page of The Sun. There's also a little bit about Musk and his falling out with Donald Trump, which is quite spectacular. Elon Musk apparently doesn't like the great big beautiful bill, and it could have something to do with the tariffs on electric cars. He also says that somehow Donald Trump is mentioned in the Epstein files. He doesn't give any evidence for that, but who can say? Front page of The Times Times, migration could force reform of rights treaty, meaning there's no taboo in rewriting the European Convention on Human Rights. That's according to the Council of Europe chief. There's loads of countries in Europe who actually want to rewrite the entire meaning of the ECHR and what it can do and what its powers are. But Keir Starmer won't sign up to it for some bizarre reason. Lord Hermer may be the reason. Kemi Badenoch today is going to make a speech in which she says that she wants to leave the ECHR if it's good for the country. Well, she said that to me last October. Front page of the Mail says Russia blames the UK for drone attack on their jets. And they say it could lead to World War III, so they're still going on about it. Meanwhile, Daily Star says if there is a nuclear attack, most people in Britain have said in no uncertain way that they would prefer to go down the pub. Absolutely unbelievable stuff. And, of course, the big story on the front page of the Telegraph, Reform Civil War over Burka ban. Zia Yusuf, the chairman of Reform, has left these premises, never to return. He says he hasn't got time anymore for it. Isabel Oakeshott was on earlier, saying basically he's worn out. He's been working too hard and he's just had to give it all up. What can you say? 0344 499 1000 is the number. We want to hear your stories about the NHS as well. This is, of course, Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Pat in West Sussex says this. Morning, Mike. Great show. The only guaranteed method to ensure the waiting list with the NHS come down, and very quickly, is to not allow MPs, presumably you mean GPs, to go private. Watch what happens then. Interesting. And I went to the docs last month, says Bill in Cheshire, diagnosed as having a hernia which requires surgery. He referred me to the local general hospital. While I was there, I asked him how long the waiting list is. He just laughed and said, no idea. Next day, I had a letter confirming that the referral was being reviewed, in quotation marks, and that I will hear something in 8 weeks from now. So I'm not on any waiting list at present, just in limbo. The whole system is a scam to play for time. I mean, it just isn't working at all. West Streeting has actually been quite disappointing, I would say. Let's talk to John Rentoul, Chief Political Commentator at The Independent. John, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
I started the show this morning scarcely able to believe that only 4 days ago we were on a war footing with Russia. And now here we are, looking forward to the weekend. It's like we've had some kind of reprieve. It's wonderful.
It was a very strange language from the Prime Minister.
It was a bit, wasn't it?
Earlier this week about putting Britain on a war footing. And yet being unable to specify by when he's going to reach this 3% target, and then NATO started talking about a 3.5% target.
Right.
It all seems a little bit of a sort of unhurried emergency.
Well, exactly. But I was saying to Christian, my producer, this morning, this is sort of the government moves so quickly now, and I don't know whether it's a function of the media or whatever it is, but it seems as though every week there's some major calamity which 2 days later gets completely forgotten about. You know, like 2 weeks ago he was ramming on about, you know, how I feel like a stranger in my own land, and, you know, we've got to crack down on immigration. It's the worst thing that's ever happened. And then sort of 2 days later it's all got forgotten about. And then there's something else coming up, you know, and then there's something else to talk about. Do you find this a new phenomenon, do you think?
It's slightly dizzying. Yeah, you're right. I wonder if social media's had some effect in speeding up the news cycle. I think journalists seem to be moving on from one story to the next, much faster than they used to.
But so does the government. I mean, Starmer puts out a tweet about every 3 or 4 hours. The office of the Prime Minister puts out a tweet about every 3 or 4 hours, and it's always moving on to another thing. You know,
it's always on different subjects. You know, you're quite right. I mean, there doesn't seem to be any sort of continuity of the story from number 10.
It's strange. Let's talk about the most surprising story, I suppose, of the morning, which is that Labour actually won a by-election up in Hamilton, which nobody predicted. Everybody said it was between the SNP and Reform, and suddenly the guy. I don't know if you've seen a clip. There's a great clip of the actual candidate who was banned from taking part in the debate because he's so useless, and he was quizzed by a guy on the removal of the the winter fuel payment, and he couldn't answer it. But he's ended up winning it, and I think nobody's any more surprised really than Anas Sarwar and Keir Starmer, presumably.
Well, I think they played a blinder actually, because I think they must have known that they had a reasonable chance. And you know, looking at the opinion polls in Scotland, you could see how Labour could easily win it, because the Labour vote hasn't really gone down very much since the last since the last Scottish Parliament elections, which is what this is. This is a Scottish Parliament by-election, whereas the SNP vote has gone down. What we didn't know was how high the Reform vote would go. They certainly outperformed their vote in Scotland, but not by enough to win the seat. So that's interesting, because it sort of sets the limits of the Reform surge, particularly in Scotland, which has exceeded expectations so far.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose what it also does, though, is give you an indication of when the election is done properly in 2026. They will get quite a big share of the proportional representation vote, you know, and they might get quite a lot of MSPs in as a result of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they might get a quarter on this showing. I mean, they got 26%, but I mean, you can't read that much from by-elections. That's the trouble. By-elections are a sort of protest vote, but actually, this by-election was not that much, not enough of a protest vote for Nigel Farage to win it. So yeah, Labour must be looking pretty comfortable about this. But I think the really big story for Reform is losing Zia Yusuf yesterday. I mean, I think that's difficult for Nigel Farage, because it really reinforces the impression that he finds it hard to work with people.
I mean, I saw an interview with him last night in which he seemed relatively relaxed about it, and he was sort of different to the way he reacted to the Rupert Lowe situation. He seemed to say that, you know, he was very complimentary about Zia Yusuf. He said he was really sorry to see him go. He said that, you know, he had this kind of heritage of coming from Goldman Sachs, and he worked in a particular way which some people found difficult. I mean, the reaction I'm getting from a lot of Reform voters this morning on this show is they're saying that they think that Zia Yusuf might have been a bit of a disruptive influence, and they're quite happy to see him go. But I think you're right, because he was given this kind of responsibility to clean up the councils, if you like, and all of that's finished, and he's taken Nathaniel Reid, the other guy that was brought in to do all that, with him. So I don't know where that leaves them.
Well, I mean, it's bad for Nigel Farage, because the one big question mark that hangs over him is whether he's enough of a team worker to be able to run a government. I mean, because he is standing on the threshold of greatness. I mean, he could well be Prime Minister after the next election, I think.
Yeah, and I think the fact that you're saying that shows how much it's moved. You know, the window has moved, if you like, from even just a year ago.
Absolutely, but he does have this huge sort of drag anchor on his reputation, which is that he seems to fall out with people. And you know, I don't think he fell out with Zia Yusuf. I think Yusuf just decided that this wasn't for him. But he was obviously very put out by that question about banning the Burka.
Yes.
Which Nigel Farage must have known about, must have encouraged.
Yeah, I mean, I said this on Wednesday. You know, there's no way. I mean, Nigel Farage was sitting right next to her. In between them was Richard Tice. They must have had a conversation about what the question would be. She put out a tweet before the actual question was put, saying, "I'm very happy to say that I've got my first question to the Prime Minister today," and she'd asked people from Runcorn what they wanted her to ask and all of that. So it's inconceivable they didn't have a conversation about what the question was, right? But also, I think Zia Yusuf kind of betrayed the fact that he's not a politician by putting out a tweet suggesting that it was dumb to ask that question.
Well, yeah, but I mean, Nigel Farage showed that he's not a politician by not making sure that Zia Yusuf was okay with that question beforehand.
Right.
So I think there's fault on both sides there, and it is interesting. I think people will notice that. I mean, I think Rupert Lowe was different. I mean, Rupert Lowe is a one-off.
Yeah.
Whereas Zia Yusuf was Nigel Farage's own choice.
Yes.
And for him to walk away really does raise questions about Farage's ability to run an effective operation.
Yeah, but I think I mean, we're actually using the phrase "reform civil war," which is what's on the front of the Telegraph. I don't think there is a civil war, because it's between Zia Yusuf, who's now gone, and Nigel Farage. I've been asking for Reform to put somebody up to talk to us this morning, and they haven't. So I can only assume that they don't want to talk about it. Isabel Oakeshott, who kind of occasionally speaks for them, but not officially, said, you know, that he basically worn himself out. And he'd found it very, very tough, not least because of all the criticism that he'd got, because he got a lot of criticism over the Rupert Lowe thing, because the people who liked Rupert Lowe blamed Zia Yusuf for forcing him out.
Yeah,
and let's not forget that he complained to the police about Rupert Lowe in a way which was never really resolved.
No, that's right. I mean, they did tangle, but I mean, I think that was a byproduct of Yusuf's attempt to professionalise the party, to make sure it was more organised, which really bore fruit in the local elections, and which was really necessary to try and sort of put to bed the sort of the idea that it's some kind of amateurish one-man band. But now that Yusuf has walked off, we're back to an amateurish one-man band.
Yeah. And speaking of amateurish one-man bands, we've got the Tory party, who are a sort of amateurish no-man band, who don't seem to have anybody leading. They've got Robert Jenrick running around making videos that are watched by millions and millions of people. Kemi Badenoch is making a big deal today of a speech that she's going to make, in which she says that she might leave the ECHR if it's in the interest of the country. Well, she did.
Which, as you pointed out, is something she said before.
Well, she said to me last October. In fact, we can play the clip. Should we play the clip? This is what she said last October. She's even stronger then than she is now.
The system is broken in so many areas. Immigration is one of them. And I keep saying that if we left the ECHR today, we would not be deporting any more people, because the people who are responsible for it don't want to do this job. I've met many Home Office officials. They're lovely people. They want to look after refugees. They want to help asylum seekers, and that's great. Go and work in a charity that does that.
Yeah.
Leaving the ECHR means that they just find something else. They just find something else to use as an excuse.
See, then she seemed to want to leave the ECHR, you know, like today. Now she's saying, well, you know, maybe if it's in the interest of the country.
Well, no, but her position has always been the same as Rishi Sunak's, I think, which is that he was prepared to leave the ECHR if it was necessary, because there's the debate about whether it has to be. Whether it can be changed. Very interesting development on that yesterday, with the Secretary of the Council of Europe saying it could be amended, or is it so hopeless that you've got to leave it, and that is where we're at. And I think Kemi Badenoch's, she's got a very difficult job, but I think she's doing it reasonably well.
Well, she did a lot better on Wednesday at Prime Minister's Questions, didn't she?
Well, I thought so, and I think her position on the ECHR is completely reasonable and able to bring people together and bridge the divides, rather than taking a hard line against the ECHR, which I think would alienate an awful lot of One Nation Tories.
Yeah, very much so. John, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. We've got to run. Let's get a voice note from Jamie on immigration.
Way to stop the illegal immigration down on the southeast coast is to stop putting them up in hotels and stop putting them up in HMOs and start putting them in government-controlled camps. Once you stop them wandering about in the local communities, they can't work in the black economy and they can't pay off the people that have shipped them over in the dinghies. We can't smash the gangs, but we certainly can smash the business model if there's a desire. Great show. Jamie from Hornchurch.
Yeah, and Jamie, I think you're absolutely right from Hornchurch. Yeah, you can smash the business model, but you can have to stop giving money to Serco and other companies that are in receipt of billions of pounds of government contracts to put these people in hotels, because they're making money. They're absolutely making a fortune. And you might even argue that the government is probably making a fortune with a kind of kickback on VAT, because, you know, the money that is being spent on these characters coming here every single day in their thousands is making a profit for an awful lot of hotel groups, for an awful lot of companies, for an awful lot of businesses. And so there's business being made, money being made by people off the backs of these characters. And that's what's wrong. It has to be said. Let's talk to Simon Danchuk, former Labour MP and Reform member. Now, it says here Reform defector, which sounds a bit unlikely. Simon, very good morning to you.
Good morning. It's good to be with you, man.
Good to see you. Let's just talk briefly before we get on to the meat of the reform situation about immigration and about the fact that the Sun's got a spread this morning in pages 8 and 9 saying that there's now starting to come back over on lorries. The stowaways have started coming back in because maybe they've decided that the boat crossings are a bit more dangerous than they'd like them to be. We've got Kemi Badenoch talking about leaving the ECHR. You know, immigration's still a massive story in this country. People care about it as the #1 issue. And yet this government continues to do nothing, really.
No, absolutely. I mean, we had Starmer saying that he had a plan to address illegal immigration, smash the gangs. Well, the only thing that Keir Starmer is smashing is Labour's reputation.
Yeah.
I mean, the numbers have gone up dramatically ever since he cancelled the Rwanda plan, which I believe was a mistake. It was shown earlier this week that did impact it, as a deterrent. It discouraged illegal immigrants from coming here. And that's interesting about using the lorries as well. We have to remember that the numbers that we are given are only the ones that we know that are coming into the country. Yeah. There's lots of people coming into the country in lorries, and they're not being counted. So the real figure's probably much higher than what's being suggested.
Yeah, I've always said that. I mean, I've always believed as well that there are many more people coming on boats that we don't know about because they land the boats where the Border Force people don't actually patrol. So they don't bring them into Dover. They can land them in any number of different parts of the southeast coast of this country where the beaches are very flat and you can literally just run a dinghy up onto the sand or onto the shingle.
And that's exactly what's happening. I've drove down to Dover and seen people running through the fields. I mean, they aren't being picked up or anything, and they're not being counted. The situation is desperately bad, and you refer to Kemi Badenoch and the idea of leaving the European Convention. I mean, all that she's going to say in this speech today is that she's going to have a review that might consider leaving the European Convention on Human Rights. Why does she need a review? She should read the room. The public, the British public, want a dramatic solution to this. And coming out of that convention is part of the solution. And they won't be satisfied until they get a political party that delivers it.
Yeah, true. What's your take on what's going on at the heart of reform with Zia Yusuf leaving? Nigel Farage said last night in an interview that, you know, he was sorry to see him go, but inevitably sometimes in politics, you know, this is what happens. People fall out with each other. People get fed up. People find it very, very difficult to take the criticism that they get on a daily basis. I mean, you've seen it all for your own eyes. You know, some of the abuse that you get sent is pretty awful. What can you tell us about what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, the first takeaway is that British politics is pretty tough. You know, people don't realise it's pretty tough being in frontline British politics, that's for sure. I think it's good that he's gone, actually. I think he made a number of mistakes. I don't think it's just about Sarah Porchin and the Burka debate. The first mistake he made is responding to Katie Hopkins on Twitter. I mean, anybody in frontline British politics knows not to bother engaging with Katie Hopkins on social media. And so that was a mistake. His handling of the Rupert Law situation was a mistake. Rupert Law had called it wrong. He'd overplayed his hand in his criticism of Nigel Farage in the Daily Mail, if you recall. Yes. But Zia Yusuf's response to that was totally inappropriate.
What do you mean, like when he reported him to the police and all that?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there didn't seem to be any substance to that. So reporting him to the police and everything around that just wasn't well handled. Yeah. And what it does illustrate is that you can't just parachute yourself into frontline British politics and expect to continue and have a big impact. You know, I've been in politics 35 years and there's highs and lows, and it takes you have to have some resilience, and perhaps he didn't really have that. And I think better for him to go on now rather than carry on and then go nearer to a general election.
Do you think Nigel was wrong to appoint him then, because he was clearly not sort of ready for prime time, if you like, if he wasn't really prepared for what was going to happen to him, if he didn't really understand what was going on? I mean, like John Rentoul made a good point. You know, if Nigel Farage had let him know that this question about the burqa was going to be put by Sarah Porchin, then he wouldn't have had to respond in the way that he did, and he shouldn't have.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not very good coordination, is it? There's no doubt about that. You know, people say, oh, Nigel is difficult to work with. That's what they imply from some of this. I don't believe that's the case at all, actually. I think he's a very accepting person, and so he's brought Yusuf in because he believes he could make a great positive contribution. And he has made a contribution. He has professionalised the party. There's no doubt about that. I don't think we should overplay it. He put out a tweet saying that he'd taken the polls from 14 to 30%. Well, a lot of that is about the public not being happy with Labour or the Conservatives. He hasn't delivered that completely himself, but he has professionalised the party. But doing business is dramatically different from running a political party, and I think he got some of that wrong. Political parties are exceptionally gigantic volunteer organisations, and you have to manage that. And on some of that, I think he got it badly wrong. He upset some of the old guard when he came in, which was unnecessary. So he made a series of mistakes, which I think is. The consequence is that he's now gone.
Yeah, true. Simon, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Simon Danchuk there, former Labour MP, now with Reform, of course. Got this from Carol. It says, morning, Mike. Really enjoying your fab show. While I'm disappointed for Nigel and Reform, I don't think this disruption will affect their overall position, as they are the only party willing to stand up and defend this country and its people. Mike, we desperately need some good news. Please have a great weekend. We'll try and find you some good news. Well, maybe somebody else can find it. Why don't you send us your good news and we can find out whether or not we can do that. Here's something that's going to really shock you, though. I've told you about this earlier. By the way, just as we speak, 38,054 is the migrant tracker count. That hasn't gone up for a couple of days. I'm sure it will go up very soon, because we probably need an update on who's come in the last 3 or 4 days. But what I was talking about to John Rentoul, the guy who won the seat in Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse by-election by just 602 votes, right? He's a guy called Davy Russell. They decided not to allow him to debate with anyone because he's basically not very good at debating. He's also not very good at being interviewed. If this is the level of the sort of MSP Labour Party in Scotland, they've got a big problem. Have a look at this.
Do you think they were right to scrap the winter fuel payment for pensioners?
The hard decisions to take.
Do you think they were right?
Well, they were very hard decisions to take.
Do you think they were right to do it? It was a hard decision. Do you think they made the right decision?
Well, they took it based on the decisions, the circumstances they'd inherited.
So you backed them? You backed the Chancellor, you backed the Prime Minister on it?
They had very hard decisions to make.
And you backed them?
I totally think that the decisions they had to make were based on the previous government's mismanagement of the country.
And you backed them on it?
On the doorsteps here, people are...
Yeah, but you backed the government. You backed the Prime Minister and the Chancellor. You can just tell me yes or no.
Well, I wasn't involved in the decision, and this is a Scottish Parliament election.
That's Davy Russell, the winner of the Scottish Hamilton by-election last night. 602 votes he got, and that's how much he won it by. I mean, who's voting for this guy? You can't put a sentence together. What? I mean, that's ridiculous, isn't it? Blimey. Anyway, listen, here's one from Rawton Lass, who says, morning, Mike. If we are on a war footing, our enemies must be licking their lips when the easiest thing in the world will be to send a few drones over to destroy all the wind turbines sticking out of the ocean around our little island and utterly decimate our energy supply. Absolutely right. Now, we just had a very important call from my colleague Jeremy Kyle, who says his son Oliver will not go to school unless I say go to school or say good morning. Oliver, go to school and do what your dad tells you, for heaven's sake. It's 8:28.
Why is there this unique obsession with victims in Gaza?
Britain is the direct contributor to the war effort that Israel is...
1% of weapons used by Israel.
Britain isn't contributing to what's happening in Sudan.
We don't care about those babies dying.
It's not that we don't care.
We don't care about it. It's not on the... Are we discussing it now?
The main demand of the demonstrators and the protesters is that Britain stops its complicity in the genocide.
If it was a genocide...
Again, this is... You're still that Japanese fighter fighting...
No, I just know what words mean.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 8:32. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10, of course. Dan from Kent says, I've got to disagree with you on this one, Mike. The Russian ambassador said to Sky News that Putin believes Britain was a huge part of the drone attacks on Russian aircraft and said there would be consequences. Yeah, well, that's on the front page of the Daily Mail as well. It comes as no surprise to me. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean we're on a war footing, does it? Does it?
We are moving to war-fighting readiness. When we are being directly threatened by states with advanced military forces, the most effective way to deter them is to be ready. And frankly, to show them that we're ready.
Yeah, they look ready, don't they? Peter says, morning, Mike, the Russia threat clip is brilliant. The workers behind, it's like Rodney has cast a spell on them, or is it just boredom? Rodney, we're going to war. Please show it again, Peter. Listen, we're going to keep showing it, I promise you. Voice note from Shirley, please.
Good morning, Mike. It's Shirley from the Cotswolds. Mike, what on earth is going on? Both sides of the pond, men with huge egos fighting like rats in a sewer. I don't know about you, but I think that Nigel is looking like a broken man, and I wouldn't be surprised if he throws the towel in today. What a sad state of affairs. You have a lovely day, Mike. Thanks. Bye.
Shirley, thank you very much indeed. Have a great weekend to you as well. Let's talk to Julian Jessup, because it might be, maybe we can find some good news with Julian. He's going to talk to us about inflation and where it's going. Apparently, April's UK inflation figure should have been 3.4%, not 3.5%. Similarly, 3.5% is the magic number, because that's apparently now what Keir Starmer says he's going to spend from GDP on defence. Julian, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
3.5 is the magic number, it would seem. Where's it going to go next month, though?
Well, first of all, about this mistake that the Office for National Statistics made, I actually think it's pretty serious. The difference between 3.5 and 3.4 may not seem a lot, right, but this number is really important, because if you've got a contract, for example, indexed to whatever the inflation number was, that contract is still going to be based on the 3.5% number, right, not the 3.4.
Right.
The mistake has also contributed to the rise in mortgage interest rates over the last month or so, because people think it's less likely the Bank of England will cut interest rates. And finally, it sort of contributes to general concerns about the credibility of official data in the UK. This isn't the only problem we've got. We've got lots of problems with some of our labour market data in particular. And of course, the population stats as well. We don't even really know how many people are in the country. So I think this is a worrying story that we can't really do evidence-based policy making if we don't know what the real numbers actually are.
But why is it that they're not able to get the numbers right, though? That's a bit worrying as well, isn't it?
Well, in this case, I think it's an exceptional error. I wouldn't actually blame the Office for National Statistics on this. It's actually some poor statistician at the Department of Transport who's calculated the number of vehicles that were paying the higher rates of vehicle excise duty wrong in that month. I wouldn't expect the ONS to sort of check every single piece of data that it's given. So I wouldn't bash the ONS too much for this, but I think there is a broader concern that we sort of underinvested in our official statistics for a long, long time. And particularly at the ONS, there are problems because they They've had a lot of staff turnover in the last few years, partly because they relocated one of their key offices to Newport in Wales. Now, nothing against Wales, I must stress, but a lot of staff left. A lot of staff want to work from home rather than come into the office. So there's a cultural problem there. There's sort of fundamental problems at the ONS that I think need addressing.
Yeah, but this is the problem, isn't it? You know, nobody likes to talk about this, and I'm very glad you've raised it because, you know, there's a great deal of inefficiency in government, whether it's local, whether it's national, whether it's, you know, the civil service, and nobody ever really wants to talk about it. So when it starts to actually affect the real running of things and the real, you know, numbers, as you've said, which are very important, then surely we should be talking about it more and somebody should be fixing it.
Yeah, I think we should be willing to have these conversations. As it happens, I think the ONS is a very good department. They did particularly well during the pandemic at measuring the impact of the shutdowns on the output of public services. I think that their track record in some areas is really, really good. But there are definitely problems there that need addressing. And as I say, it's really important because if, you know, policymakers, including officials at the Bank of England, don't have good data on inflation or the labour market, then we're all going to suffer. Interest rates probably higher for longer than they would otherwise have been, and all sorts of other policy mistakes, including problems in setting taxes and spending if we don't know exactly how the economy is doing, let alone where it might be in 5 years' time.
Right. And just incidentally, I mean, I know I sort of mentioned it in passing at the start. What do you think is going to happen next month? Where will we be inflation-wise?
Well, inflation is going to be quite volatile over the next few months. It wouldn't surprise me if it falls in the short term and then rises again in the autumn, largely depending on what happens to energy prices over that period. But I think the bigger point is that inflation over the next year or two, I think, will fall down to about 2% or maybe even lower. And that's basically because there isn't enough money circulating around the economy to keep inflation this high. You also have the labour market slowing rapidly. So lots of people, unfortunately, now starting to lose their jobs, and pay settlements, at least in the private sector, are coming in at around about 3%. So those are sort of numbers, the growth in the money supply and the weakness in the labour market all point to inflation falling to about 2% over the next 1 to 2 years. And that allowing the Bank of England at least to keep cutting interest rates. Yeah, indeed. 8:38. Thank you very much indeed. Julian Jessup talking to us there, independent economist, on the volatility of the inflation figures and also the uselessness of the National Office of Statistics, because they keep getting things wrong, not least because apparently, according to Julian, they're working from home an awful lot of the time. Morning, Mike, says Julian in Coventry. I think the context in which Sarah Poachin asked the question was anything but dumb. She was also trying to show up Starmer for always wanting to align with his beloved EU, but for some strange reason not on the Burka debate. Yeah, I think the question was very well put. I think it was very well thought through. And it got, actually, in many ways, for reform, the result that they wanted, which was Keir Starmer running away from it at 100 miles an hour. We'll play it again in a minute. Morning, Mike, says Margaret in Birmingham. I think this spat with Donald Trump and Elon Musk will soon be forgotten. Elon will be invited to the president's birthday party on the 14th of June. I hope so. Let's have love, peace and harmony in the White House. Donald Trump is great. Indeed he is. Let's get a voice note from Dean.
Morning, Mike. Great show as always, mate. Couple of things. The war footing that Keir Starmer's put us on is a lot of tosh. It's just another tactic to deflect away from his terrible government. It's from the old playbook. You know, distract, because we can all see everything crumbling around us. And the second thing is on Yusuf leaving the Reform Party. Within a week, another chairman would be in and everyone would have forgot about it. What this is not going to do is help the Tories or Labour in any way. They're not going to stop this juggernaut of reform coming along and hopefully forming the next government. Cheers, mate. Have a good day.
Dean, very good to hear from you. Thank you very much indeed. Could not agree with you more. Glenn says this from Leeds. War footing? Sir Keith isn't putting his willies up me. That wasn't in the manifesto. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. This, of course, is the home of common sense. Here's one from Danny, who says, Mike, I think they should ban the full face covering. When I was in Iraq in the military in 2000s, we had a male trying to enter the camp wearing one. This is a matter of security. There's already been males walking around England wearing them as well. And one here from Dan in Kent, who says, on the 81st anniversary of D-Day, the government needs to understand that protection of the borders is the #1 fundamental thing of government. We all see the huge money rackets like vape shops, barbers and car washes. It needs to stop now, not in 4 years. Needs to stop now, I should say. I've got a quick correction to make, if I may. Apparently, the HMRC press office has got in touch with us because they spotted a YouTube video of a story we did yesterday, which was entitled "A Terrible Story." 100,000 tax records and £47 million stolen from HMRC by hackers, right? According to HMRC, they say, to be clear, no records were lost. We are writing to some customers to let them know we have identified unauthorised access to their tax accounts and to reassure them we have secured their account and that they have not suffered any financial loss. Very good. And then they go, and this was not a cyber attack. It involved criminals using personal information they had obtained elsewhere, for example via phishing attacks or from other organisations, to access HMRC services and online tax accounts in order to extract payments from HMRC. So they extracted payments from HMRC by using the internet. I would call that a cyber attack. I don't think the HMRC people understand what cyber attack means. They then say, we would appreciate it if this could be accurately portrayed to your viewers and listeners. Yeah, okay. So when you had monies removed, extracted payments by criminals using the internet, that wasn't a cyber attack. Okay then. Just want to clear that up. Let's talk to Liam Cottery, Director of Mary Monson Solicitors. He's going to talk to us about the Crown Court backlog in England and Wales, which is now reaching epidemic proportions, 75,000 cases by the end of 2024, which is up 11% from the previous year. This is research from the Institute for Fiscal Studies. Liam, very good morning to you, sir.
Morning, mate.
Good to talk to you. The backlog in the courts in this country has been going on for quite some time. I talk to lawyers quite a lot about this, and it's a real problem, isn't it?
A huge problem. We're talking about very much pre-COVID times. Occasionally we hear the politicians talk about COVID or barrister strikes and things like that. The reality, this has been going well before 2016. 2016, we're at 40,000. It's a failure of successive governments to invest properly in the criminal justice system, whether it's the police, Crown Prosecution Service being overstretched, legal aid not being accessible to regular people, courts, literally buildings falling apart around us. It's a real disgrace, and it will take a generation to fix.
Yeah, I mean, I'm told that an awful lot of Crown Courts don't even sit anymore because there simply aren't enough judges, not enough lawyers, not enough personnel to just actually open them.
And it's completely true. I'm in those buildings all the time. That locked large rooms where there's no lawyers working, cases aren't going on, there aren't enough judges being trained. Frankly, they're probably not paid enough to be attracted to the role. Not enough barristers to cover the backlog. I can't get my barrister of choice for love or money at the moment. It's just an impossible situation.
Right. And so, is the answer to train more barristers? Is the answer to simply put more money into the system? What's the answer?
Well, I'm afraid it is that age-old answer. It's more money required, proper investment, proper education, and attract people to the industry. Again, I'm not just talking about defence lawyers like me. I'm talking about police. I'm talking about Crown prosecutors, barristers. It's really important to make the job attractive. Loads of people do it just for the love of defending people or being part of the criminal justice system, and that's great that they do. But to get everyone involved who would be interested no matter what, people need to be paid properly, and people are frankly underpaid at the moment. It's not that it's just not very attractive. People are underpaid in this industry now.
And presumably the result of all this is that people who are charged with various crimes, which are Crown Court sort of cases, they have to wait a very long time before they actually get their case in court.
Well, Mike, I'm grateful that you're thinking of my clients. And of course, my clients sometimes wait years for a trial, years on bail, a couple of years until a trial comes along. And the common example is a rape trial. But then on the other side, you've got the alleged victims of these cases. And if those people have had one of the worst things happen to them that could happen, and they have to wait years for a trial to get in, and then for some reason that court building's falling apart or there's no judge available, they have to wait another year. And often those people don't even continue. A trial doesn't take place. So rapists are definitely getting away with it because of these delays. Now, of course, many people just haven't committed the crime, but you don't have a trial to find out what's happened. It's really awful.
It's dreadful, absolutely dreadful. Liam, listen, thanks for pointing it out to us. Liam Coterie, Director of Mary Monson Solicitors there, telling us all about how terrible the state of our justice system actually is. And that, the nitty-gritty of all of that is when you get right down to it, never mind what we talk about the police not doing or the prison service not doing, but in between that, the actual court system is failing as well. Absolutely unbelievable. Here's one from Dorothy in East Kilbride. Morning, Mike. She said, who in their right mind would vote for Mr. Russell? He's that Labour guy that won the Hamilton by-election. His interview was embarrassing, to say the least. It was no surprise Labour won the Hamilton, Stonehouse and Larkhall by-election, but I don't think Mr. Russell will last very long. Yeah, no, I don't think he will either. Are we going to do Donald Trump here? Yeah, let's do Donald Trump. He was criticised by Elon Musk. Elon Musk said overnight that he thinks that Donald Trump's name appears in the Epstein papers. He also said that he hates the great big beautiful bill, says it's very, very dangerous and a big waste of money. Here's what Donald Trump had to say about it.
You saw a man who was very happy when he stood behind the Oval Desk, and even with the black eye, I said, do you want a little makeup? We'll get you a little makeup. But he said, no, I don't think so, which is interesting and very nice. He wants to be who he is, so you could make that statement too, I guess. Look, Elon and I had a great relationship. I don't know if we're well anymore. I was surprised because you were here. Everybody in this room practically was here as we had a wonderful send-off. He said wonderful things about me. You couldn't have nicer, said the best things. He's worn the hat. Trump was right about everything. And I am right about the great, big, beautiful bill. We call it a great, big, beautiful bill because that's what it is. But I'm very disappointed because Elon knew the inner workings of this bill better than almost anybody sitting here, better than you people. He knew everything about it. He had no problem with it. All of a sudden he had a problem. And he only developed the problem when he found out that we're going to have to cut the EV mandate because that's billions and billions of dollars. And when that was cut, and Congress wanted to cut it, he became a little bit different, and I can understand that.
Donald Trump, they're talking about his falling out with Elon Musk, which no doubt won't last very long, like most things. Matt in Royston says this, Mike, if what Elon Musk says about Trump is true, he sat on that information, still decided to publicly support him and acted like they were best mates for all that time. Not the behaviour of someone shocked, disgusted or against Epstein's crimes. Only now, when things aren't going in his favour, he decides to release it to show how awful Trump is. But how does that make him look? Good question. This is Talk.
I was talking about checks and balances and processes that would prohibit an MP asking a question which would cause affront to the chairman, who would then go off and tweet something about it. It just doesn't. It's mismanagement at a gross level. The debate is over the burqa, which goes to the heart of the debate of multiculturalism in many ways.
Not why Zia Yusuf left. It's not why Zia Yusuf left. Nothing to do with that.
And there should be a joined-up view within reform on the burqa. Whatever it is, there should be a joined-up view.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. Listen, I've got this lovely gift here that's been sent in by Dee Williams, who's written me a lovely letter. Apparently Kevin O'Sullivan and I made a lovely video for her birthday some time ago, and she's got a grandson who works here in the video department, and she sent me this lovely thing for Ziggy. It's like a dog. She knits things for dogs. So you put his feet in there, his head there. I'm going to go and see him later on today. I'll take it. Listen, Dee, thank you very much indeed for sending that in. I will take it down to Ziggy and see whether he puts it on. He's getting a bit long in the tooth now, it has to be said. Let's go to Philippa Rawlinson, Director of Remembrance of the Royal British Legion, because, of course, today is indeed the 81st anniversary of the D-Day landing, something which is very, very close to my heart and certainly close to an awful lot of people's hearts as well. Philippa, very good morning to you.
From Bayeux, just a few metres away from the cemetery, Commonwealth War Graves Commission Cemetery in Bayeux, where we'll be welcoming veterans to mark D-Day 81 in just a couple of hours' time.
Wow. I was there just a couple of years ago. I took my sons there because I thought, it was time for them to see the Normandy beaches. And I said to them, one of them was 18 at the time, and I said, you would have been here back in that terrible time of World War II. And it was a really, really strident and interesting vision, because nothing's really changed, has it? When you walk those beaches, it's as if you were back in those days.
Absolutely. I've been privileged in my role with the Royal British Legion to be here for a number of years to mark D-Day. And I think looking out at those beaches and realising how exposed they are, you can only admire the courage of those many, and they, as you say, very young men, many of them, from Britain, our allies, from right across the Commonwealth, coming ashore to defend the freedoms that we enjoy today. And I think it's really poignant that many of those who still survive and can want to come back year on year, and we're looking forward to welcoming them shortly. But they also talk very much about those who fell along the way, their comrades that didn't go home, and how they're the true heroes. But we're really keen at the Royal British Legion to put all of those veterans and all those served in the Second World War generation at the heart of our commemoration, so that we can say thank you to them, pay tribute, and listen to their stories while we still have them.
Yeah, of course. And obviously ever diminishing numbers come one year after another. How many have you got coming over, as far as you know?
We're expecting to have about 20 with us this year. Of course, it's been a big year in the UK. Royal British Legion was at the heart of the commemorations just about a month ago for VE Day, and of course we'll be marking the end of the Second World War with VJ Day at an event with the National Memorial Arboretum in August. So I think naturally they are sadly slipping away, but there's also a lot of things happening in the UK this year, so people may not have chosen to travel, but still I think 20 there or thereabouts will be a good number to have around, and to be joining us that very special service.
Sure. And the locals there in Normandy are very grateful, aren't they, even now, for what happened and how they were rescued from what could have been a terrible fate.
Absolutely. The whole of the area and the region comes alive. And we were at a reception hosted by the Mayor of Bayer yesterday evening, and they are very fulsome in a very formal sense, but informally right across the region to thank our veterans of the Second World War and to commemorate their service and pay tribute to them. We've got our service, but there's many other services happening around the region, and people stopping, remembering, paying tribute and coming together in that moment of reflection. And that's what at the Royal British Legion we encourage. And so we're looking forward to making happen in just a couple of hours of time.
Nice. Well, I'm looking out the window here and it's not looking too clever weather-wise here. What's it like over there?
Well, we all had our wet weather plans in place yesterday looking at the forecast, but we have woken up to fingers crossed, blue skies that are set to hold for the next few hours, brilliant. Which will make a huge difference to the comfort of our veterans as they mark the 81st anniversary of D-Day.
Absolutely brilliant. Well, Philippa, have a wonderful day and do give them all my best, and we'll be watching because it is a fabulous commemoration and something that we should all remember and take into our stride. And with the as we go into the weekend, just imagine the 81st anniversary of those D-Day landings and try and imagine, if you haven't been there, you really should go. But if you have been there, you'll know what I mean when I say it's quite a sacred place, really, because it's where European freedom was actually born. You know, it's where so many things could have been different, and if brave men and women had not gone and fought in that Second World War and taken that incredible journey across the English Channel to safeguard all of us, you know, we wouldn't be here. If we were here, we'd certainly be speaking German, you know. So I think it's something that we really, really, really should embrace with all of our hearts. David says this, morning, Mike. I just have to say that I thought you've really cleared up the information you received from the HMRC perfectly. Yeah, we weren't the victims of a cyber attack. It was just some criminals that accessed our records by using the internet. Definitely not a cyber attack. One from Keith in Cornwall. Mike, just listening to your guest about courts, how can they have no money when solicitors and barristers are charging upwards of £200 an hour? I've just been through defending a civil case against my ex. She lied her way through court, and even the judge admitted she lied, yet still awarded her £14,000 of her £30,000 claim. The bigger issue is her solicitors are now claiming £220,000 of costs against me for a £14,000 claim. They are the criminals. Well, that's a very good perspective on it, I have to say. And one from Barry, on the courts, there seems to be plenty of lawyers representing illegal immigrants or criminals seeking to stay in the UK. Well, there is that as well. Not a lot of love for lawyers out there. What would you expect? Coming up in the next hour, we've got loads more to do. We're going to take more of your calls. We're going to take more of your fantastic voice notes as well. Benedict Spence is here. We're going to talk about what's going on in reform, plus much else besides. This is Talk. Good evening and welcome to Plank of the Week. It's the one show where you do not have to be worried about judgmental people because we'll do all the judging for you. Let's just have a look at how Humsley Useless is now spending his time.
There goes your career, mate.
Over there a bit is over towards where all the migrants come in. He's jumping there. There he goes. He goes over the bar. Hello, and lady. Unfortunately, it catches on his Johnson.
If he's Plank of the Week, he's got a sizable plank.
That's
a whole different show.
Plank of the Week, Fridays at 7 on Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 9:02. Where does the time go? I've no idea. We've reached Friday, right? It's the 6th of June. It doesn't look very summery. I walked out of the office yesterday and met somebody coming back in the other way. And the wind was blowing, it's howling. You know, it was really cold. It was kind of drizzling. I'm going, well, is this summer? I mean, Wimbledon's coming up in a couple of weeks, is it? You know, we haven't even got any sunshine. It's going to be pretty cold and miserable all weekend. We just spoke there before the news about the 81st anniversary of the D-Day landings. A fascinating and wonderful, incredible event, which obviously led to the terrible, terrible deaths of so many young men who went to their aid of their country. So, without question, they literally got on a boat and got off a boat while being fired upon by Germans on the beaches of Normandy. An incredible day, an incredible sacrifice that was made by so many people. And today, when we look back on that sort of thing, you can't really imagine what it would be like if that was to happen now. Keir Starmer, of course, thinks that we should be on a war footing. Have a listen to this.
We are moving to war-fighting readiness. When we are being directly threatened by states with advanced military forces, the most effective way to deter them is to be ready. And frankly, to show them that we're ready.
What's he talking about? We're not in a war footing. You know, that was on Monday, right? By Tuesday, he'd already forgotten we were on a war footing. He's mentioning today that they might go to a 3.5% movement of GDP when it comes to defence spending. But basically, you know, Keir Starmer, for the first time in a while, isn't really even anywhere near the front pages this morning. Trump's on the front pages, Reform are on the front pages again, making the news, because that's what they seem to be doing. Labour have won a by-election, right, which you would think people would be crowing about, but nobody's really crowing about it. Labour government never come on this show, they hardly ever do. When they win something, you'd think they would want to. But no sign of them. It's all gone very quiet. I'll tell you why, because quite frankly, it's all a bit embarrassing. Because the guy, I'm going to play you the clip, the guy who actually won the by-election is basically, is practically illiterate. He can't speak. He can't form a sentence. I mean, it's ridiculous. And it's not me being anti-Scottish, you know, I'm Scottish, I lived up there, I know what it's like. But the guy literally is a numpty. That's what we call them. Coming up, we'll also talk about Wes Streeting on the front page of the Telegraph today. He says the walking wounded should not go to A&E. There's going to be an NHS shake-up in which they're going to actually turn people away from the A&E, Accident Emergency Department, if there's not much wrong with them. So if you're having to go to the A&E because, I don't know, you stuck a screwdriver in your hand or, you know, you've managed to break your leg while you fell off a ladder, don't go to the A&E then. No. As long as you can move around, you should find some other place to get treatment, basically. 500 new ambulances are going to be brought out to set new ways of working. Paramedics will be able to access patient data on the spot. Mr. Streeting says a new plan for A&E will take the NHS out of the dark ages. I mean, what are they talking about? David Beckham, meanwhile, on the front of the Sun, is going to get a knighthood. A rise at Sir Beck's is what it says. Very nice. Also on the front page of the Daily Mail, Russia are apparently going to blame Britain for the drone attack on all their aeroplanes. And on the front page of the Times, there's a story about migrants. It says here, migration could force reform of the Human Rights Treaty. And that, of course, is the ECHR, the European Convention on Human Rights, can be changed, according to the Council of Europe chief. There's lots of European countries want to see it changed. Kemi Badenoch wants to see it done away with altogether, but only if it's for the good of the country. Meanwhile, 38,054 people have come here so far this year since the Labour government got in. That's from July of last year, I should say. 0344 499 1000. This, of course, is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Now, I don't want you to think that we've forgotten about how useless Labour are, and because this is Friday, of course, it's time for the gaffes that we always celebrate. And here's one from Rachel Reeves announcing a U-turn on winter fuel allowance.
had to make decisions and payment the poorest pensioners, but to that they this coming to that they this coming and people will get more people will get winter fuel payment.
Yeah, more people will get winter fuel. Nobody knows how many or what they will get because they haven't worked that out yet. They're still working it out. Let's get a voice note from Gaz.
Morning, Mike. Great show, mate. Happy Friday. Gaz from Pontefract. Rachel Reeves is the name. Fleecing the country is my game. I fiddle the books to hide my mistakes. Check my CVs. All of them fakes. Tax, tax, tax. Thanks very much. I'll take it. I'll make you a promise, then I'll break it. I don't care if you get scurvy or rickets, as long as I still get my free concert tickets. I do have an O-level in home economics, but every other claim I make is a load of old rubbish.
Very good. Well played, Gaz. So we've had some great contributions this week, I have to say. One of the funniest ones, of course, was the Who Do You Think You're Kidding, Mr. Starmer, which came out, I think, on Monday when we were on a war footing. I'm going to give you a new clip as well of Davy Russell, the man who won the election in Hamilton last night, because this has got to be seen to be believed. But before I do that, let me just make a clarification, which I've been asked to do by HMRC. They apparently took exception to the fact that we said that 100,000 tax records had been accessed by criminals and £47 million stolen from the HMRC by hackers. According to HMRC, this incorrectly states that HMRC has lost tax records to organised criminals in a cyber attack. They're not saying that the 47 million was wrong. They're not saying that 100,000 tax records haven't been accessed either. They're just saying that HMRC has lost tax records is wrong. Well, I don't think we said that they'd lost them. To be clear, this is what the HMRC statement says. No records were lost. We are writing to some customers to let them know we have identified unauthorised access to their tax accounts and reassure them we have secured their accounts and that they have not suffered any financial loss. Well, that's all right then. So where's the 47 million gone and where's it come from? They carry on in the same vein. This was not a cyber attack, they say. It involved criminals using personal information they had obtained elsewhere. Okay, what, on the internet? For example, via phishing attacks made on the internet or from other organisations on the internet to access HMRC services and online tax accounts on the internet in order to extract payments from HMRC. All of this seems to have happened on the internet. Therefore, I would suggest to you, HMRC, that it was a cyber attack, because that's how cyber attacks happen. They happen on the internet when people phish with a PH and find out information that they're not supposed to know. So when you say this is not a cyber attack, I think that's entirely wrong. But thanks for clearing it up. We would appreciate if this could be accurately portrayed to your viewers and listeners. Well, I think I've done that. I'll do it again before the end of the show. Never mind. Where are we? Oh, Benedict. Oh no! Listen, before we talk to Benedict Spence, you've got to see this. Davy Russell, right? This is the guy who won the by-election last night in Hamilton, Larkhall, and Stonehouse. This is him being quizzed by a Scottish journalist about whether he agreed or not with the withholding of the winter fuel allowance from pensioners.
Do you think they were right to scrap the winter fuel payment for pensioners?
The hard decisions to take.
Do you think they were right?
Well, they were very hard decisions to take.
Do you think they were right to do it? It was a hard decision. Do you think they made the right decision?
Well, they took it based on the decisions, the circumstances they'd inherited.
So you backed them? You backed the Chancellor, you backed the Prime Minister on it?
They had very hard decisions to make.
And you backed them?
I totally think that the decisions they had to make were based on the previous government's mismanagement of the country.
And you backed them on it?
On the doorsteps here, people are...
yeah, but you backed the government. You backed the Prime Minister and the Chancellor. You can just tell me yes or no.
Well, I wasn't involved in the decision, and this is a Scottish Parliament election.
Yeah, he's going to be great, isn't he? I thought the reporter was going to headbutt him, give him the hint, the Glasgow kiss. You backed him, did you? Did you know? How no? Did you not back him? Anyway, Benedict Spence is here. Benedict, very good morning to you.
Morning. Sorry, I'm just laughing. Listening to
I mean,
I don't know what it is. There's something both incredibly dignified and also very menacing about a Scottish reporter saying yes or no. Do you back it? Yes or no?
She's going to go, tell me.
You don't know if he's going to sort of stay very poised and dignified, or as you say, he's just going to lose his temper completely.
But Davy Russell, the candidate, the now MSP for Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse, he doesn't appear to be imbued with a great deal of common sense, does he?
No, he doesn't. Not a great public speaker, that one.
Not really. Well, they wouldn't let him do the debate, and now you see why.
Yeah, I heard that they weren't going to let him do that, and I thought it was just because the party didn't want to be embarrassed by questions about policy, rather than it's the actual candidate who can't answer them.
Can't put two sentences together. But I mean, it's funny this morning because you would expect, Labour to be all over the airwaves crowing about, despite what everybody says, we've won the election. But they're sort of not doing it because it seems they're kind of slightly embarrassed about it because, of course, it shouldn't be a surprise that Labour win an election, but it sort of is.
Yeah, and I think it is a surprise result. I think it's largely, I'll be honest with you, I think there's probably, because there's the motivation from local voters to rally behind the Labour candidate, because actually, in the face of other things, Labour is always seen as a much more Scottish party north of the border than the Tories or certainly Reform, which, we heard a lot about this in the build-up to the by-election rhetoric about how Reform is an English party. It's a sort of an English nationalist sort of party, and that its values aren't very Scottish. So I do think... I think as much as north of the border, I think there's a lot of discontent with the electoral system, the all-party system. I still think it's going to take a little longer for that dam to break, so to speak, and it's understandably so, because they look at everything that isn't Labour or the party with Scottish in it, and they go, well, that's a bit English for us, so we'll still hold on to it.
And they tried, I mean, it's bad news for the SNP. I mean, I know that we're starting to get a bit sort of localised up in Scotland there, but it's very bad news for the SNP who held this seat and who have now lost it, because it shows that the damage that Nicola Sturgeon did to the party, I think, is pretty much terminal.
Yeah, I think the SNP survived because the Tories were doing well in Westminster and because Labour were not a viable alternative, and people were fed up with Labour in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis. The SNP have not governed well in Scotland at all, and I think that it was only a matter of time, actually, before opinions turned against them. But as you say, the vote for Labour is not really a vote for Labour. It's a vote against, in this case, the SNP, and also against Reform as a very deliberate, we don't want this sort of English party coming in. But the situation in Scotland, you're right to say that we're sort of getting a bit Scotland-centric talking about the subject now, but it is worth talking about because it gets lost in the sort of the milieu of Westminster politics.
Yes.
And that is that actually Scotland has just been in some ways, even worsely governed than the rest of the country has.
Yes, it has. And I mean, we're going to find out, I guess, soon that Wales has also similarly been worsely governed, as you say. Very Trumpian phrase, that, worsely governed.
Worsely governed. Sorry about
bigly. But yeah,
I was up very late last night following the Trump meltdown. So
yes, well, let's talk about the Trump-Musk scenario, because it's quite fascinating, isn't it?
Oh, it's phenomenal. I couldn't stop laughing. I mean, I don't know whose house J.D. Vance is going to spend Christmas at. It's going to be very awkward.
Right.
But, I mean, the breakdown...
But you knew it was going to happen, didn't you, in the end?
Yeah, the egos were just too large, and the prevailing sort of worldviews, I think, were just too disparate. Elon Musk has these, some would say, quite eccentric views about what government should do and about what companies should do. And Donald Trump's base is not really about getting to Mars. It's not really about electric vehicles or anything like that. We're talking about, MAGA Republicans are not those kind of people. And then I think just the very different characters of the two was always going to lead to some tensions. Trump is quite flamboyant in his own way, but Musk is slightly electrified. He's like an eel when he's on stage. So I'm not surprised that it did happen. And also, frankly, given that this is the age of social media, I'm not surprised that it is being played out on social media rather than behind closed doors. The actual allegations are a bit fruity, bit interesting, but that collision was always set to happen. I wouldn't be surprised if they actually got back together down the line and made up again, because these are two people who are able to do that. But for the rest of us, it is very entertaining in the short term.
It is, because let's not forget. I mean, it doesn't seem that long ago since Elon Musk presented Donald Trump with a Tesla. Do you remember? And he got into it. It was sort of about to drive it around, and then I think Caroline Leavitt certainly, and a couple of the other members of staff got in the Trump Tesla and drove it around and took pictures, and it was all very sort of hail fellow, well met. But Musk is also a guy who admitted, I think it was last week or so, that during the time that he was working on Doge and he was in and out of the White House, he was on ketamine quite a lot.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite a thing to admit to.
It really is.
We've come a long way
tranquilizer.
We've come a long way from Bill Clinton. Yeah, I tried dope, but I didn't inhale.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
when I decided to, slash 600 billion from the Defence Department's budget, I was high on ketamine. Great.
I suppose if anything particularly important comes out in the wash later, I don't know, we've accidentally cancelled the Department for Nuclear Defence in Doge. You can always turn around and go, well, in my defence, I was on a lot of horse tranquilizers.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got to ask you about the reform situation as well. Front page of the Telegraph today. I've heard from various people this morning very different views about the Zia Yusuf bust-up with Nigel Farage, whether it was a bust-up, whether it wasn't a bust-up, whether he was just kind of he ran out of road, he was just frustrated by the process. I mean, it only seemed a couple of days ago that Zia Yusuf was being very fulsome in his attack on waste in local government.
I think that this is... Two things can be true at once. It's a mistake in that I think that this is another sign of indiscipline in the party, and I know that Zia Yusuf was not particularly popular amongst a lot of grassroots members, but he did serve a valuable function in the attempts to professionalise the party in terms of fundraising and in terms of network building. He was an organiser, he was good at that. At the same time, I don't think this is going to dent Reform's polling at all. I don't think most people, even a lot of Reform voters, actually know who Zia Yusuf is. So I think two things can be true at once. Farage was very, I think, kind towards him in his message after he left.
Yes.
He was flattering, which is very different to how he was about both Ben Habib and Rupert Lowe, which is, on the one hand, possibly a sign that he understands he needs to appear more professional when these departures inevitably happen. Or it could be a sign that actually he did quite value Zia Yusuf and that he does think that this could potentially be a loss.
Yeah.
But as I say, it's the organisational aspect and the fundraising aspect. In terms of the actual polling, I don't think this is going to have any impact on Reform.
I don't think it will. I mean, my interest is in the sort of the investigation, if you like, of the local councils. They started in Kent just this week, at the beginning of this week. And Nathaniel Reid, the guy who was sort of the data guy that they brought in, has also gone as well, which means I wonder who they're going to now get to do that. And I asked Isabel Oakeshott that because we couldn't get an official from Reform on today, and she said, "Oh, there's going to be loads of people crawling all over all that stuff, so you don't have to worry about it." But surely it needs to have a sort of a man at the top, doesn't it? It needs to have a sort of a man at the head of it.
Yeah, to say that there's going to be loads of people who are going to be keen on doing it, okay, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be the right people for the job at all. It doesn't mean that that they're going to be answering to the right person. That's what is important about putting in place these sorts of hierarchical structures in a political party. And the one thing that I would say about Reform is, whilst it definitely has a leader at the top, beyond that, it is a bit of a mess. And whilst, again, I'll say this in the short term, whilst that's not going to hurt their polling because they're not yet in a position to mess anything up too badly, they're not in a national government, they're only doing things at a local level. If you want to survive long term, you do need these structures in place, you need plans in place. I mean, for heaven's sake, looking at what's happening right now with Labour, where it turns out actually there isn't much of a plan, and just being a very popular party, a very large party, isn't good enough. And I think whilst you can say, okay, fine, we're very early on in this parliament, they're polling very well, they can get these teething troubles out of the way now and it not hurt them too much. At some point, these bust-ups are going to have to stop. The party is going to have a unified message about everything. Because as things stand right now, if you're a journalist, you're sat there thinking, right, Reform has got a couple of lines on a couple of issues that everybody agrees on. But there's a great big swathe of things, like the Burka, for instance, that they haven't got an official policy on, and nobody's thought to ask them. why don't I cause some mischief and find a councillor or this MP and see if I can get them to go off at a tangent about something? That's what a sensible, I say sensible, mischievous media would do. Fortunately for Reform, I don't think a lot of the mainstream media, the press media, is actually imaginative to do that.
No, they're really not, I'm afraid. We used to be a lot better at it. But there you go. Thank you. Benedict Spence, good to talk to you. Have a good weekend. Political commentator there, Benedict Spence, with his view on what's going on at Reform. Katie has sent me this. She says, from Hampshire, unfortunately, I think you're wrong on the HMRC cyber hack. I know from insurances I've had that cyber insurance does not generally cover phishing, etc., as it is not classed as cyber crime. It is a crime that has been committed and the delivery is electronic. Therefore, I had to take out cybercrime insurance and crime insurance to run side by side to cover any crime by electronic means that is not classed as cybercrime. It's ridiculous, I know. Well, that's a bit like having health insurance when they say, well, we don't cover you for that because it's a pre-existing condition, but you're still sick. You know, the idea that you don't necessarily call it cybercrime doesn't mean it isn't. Any electronic crime, as far as I'm concerned, is cybercrime. And if insurance companies don't cover it, well, that doesn't surprise me. Insurance companies are basically a rip-off. Mike, just on the criminal justice system, the backlog is only going to get worse as the legal aid system is being held to ransom. And so for weeks we have not been able to apply for funding and are working for free. Once it gets to Crown Court, some have come to a standstill because there is no funding in place to instruct barristers. That's from Jeff. Are you saying as a lawyer it's come to a complete stop? Derek in Salford says this, morning Mike, surely the war footing we are now on is a perfect excuse for Rachel from accounts to tear up her fiscal rules and of course raise one or all of those three taxes the Liar Party said before the election they wouldn't touch. Well, that's a very interesting point. I don't know if we're on a war footing or not. Shall we check with the Prime Minister?
We are moving to war-fighting readiness. When we are being directly threatened by states with advanced military forces, the most effective way to deter them is to be ready. And frankly, to show them that we're ready.
You might want to cancel that table for Sunday lunch at the pub, you know, because you never know, do you? Coming up, we're going to talk to Simon Calder, because apparently there's some travel chaos, believe it or not. Hard to believe, I know. And don't forget, by the way, Morning Glory's podcast is out every single weekday after the show, around about 10:15. It goes out, sent out by one of our extremely efficient oppos out there in the big team that celebrates Morning Glory. We'll be back after this with Simon Calder.
A lot of the professionalisation of the party that we've seen owes a lot to him. I'm also aware he's rubbed people up the wrong way in lots of ways. He's a young man in a hurry. and sometimes young men in a hurry upset people, and I'm sure he's made mistakes. I think the question that Sarah Pochin asked yesterday about the Burka ban, I think that perhaps was the trigger. He described the question as dumb earlier today, which is not the sort of thing a chairman of a party
Well, yeah,
should...
it's not the sort of thing you should be saying in public.
No.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10. Just about another half an hour to go. Alex Phillips will be in after that. Plank of the Week tonight, of course, starring Alex Phillips. And actually, a first for Plank of the Week, because it's the first time we've had an all-female panel, which actually worked rather well. So we might have to do it like that in the future. It was a bit like Loose Women, only funnier. Scott in Dorset says, morning Mike, 2 years ago I went to A&E with severe abdominal pain. I walked in, so was walking wounded, but I happened to have a ruptured appendix, and the doctors told me if I'd left it a week I'd have been dead with sepsis. By West Streeting's guidelines, I should have sat at home until I was unable to walk. Yeah, exactly. You would have died in your chair. That's the problem. Sean from Grimsby says, if we were in a war footing, then we would be teaching people how to shoot. Complete guff by the PM as usual. And morning, Mike, says Dave in Aberdeen. Two-tier will probably announce a free trade deal with Russia on Monday. That's the reason he no longer mentions war. Let's get a voice note from Darren.
Good morning, Mike. Darren from Bradford. Usual great show. Just a quick one. Is there any way, I know that they're in the news like constantly, that we could not have Keir Starmer and his bunch of loonies on your programme for like, I don't know, maybe an hour? Just to give us a break from listening to his droning, miserable, planking, useless voice. Cheers for that, mate. Have a great day.
I don't know. I don't know if I can make that commitment to you. I'll try. We'll try and do a complete Starmer-free zone for an hour next week, if we can. That's going to be tough, though. Really, really hard. All I can tell you is that he doesn't win Plank of the Week this week, even though he is nominated. So that's the first time in 3 weeks he hasn't won it. Simon Calder's here, travel correspondent for The Independent. I believe he's in Lithuania. How glamorous. Simon, a very good morning to you.
Yes, I'm living the dream in the bus station at Trakai, which is just outside Vilnius, the capital. But I'm also following what's happening in the UK. Of course, Talk is keeping me up to speed, and I'm watching in particular what ministers are saying about us using the e-gates.
Oh, yes.
It's been, as I was speaking to that Peter Carbon at the weekend, pretty miserable weekend for an awful lot of people flying in or out of various European airports, in particular coming out of Faro. People were missing planes because it took so long to get through the passport queues, because as we decided when we left the European Union, we want to have our passports checked on the way out as well as on the way in. They all got to be stamped, and people were waiting for 2 hours and running to the gate only to find that the flight had already gone, and they had spent hundreds of pounds getting a new flight. So over the past 24 hours, the government's basically been saying it's all going to be fine. We've got agreement that the e-gates at Faro will be opened to UK travellers. Now, we've been given the impression that all you do is you go in, you put your passport down, you walk through. Of course, that's not the case at all. As you and I have discussed, all that an e-gate does is it looks at your passport. It's got biometric encryption on it. It says, is that Mike Graham? Well, it looks like him, although he's very young and handsome. Yeah. And what are we? Is his passport valid? And it's connected to a database. And sure, the Portuguese may well connect things to their database, and that's fine. We're still going to need it stamped, though, because that is absolutely what we signed up for, what we demanded. So anybody who says, "Oh, you just wave your passport and through you go," I'm afraid that is not going to happen.
So you won't. So if you do go through an e-gate, you then have to go and stop somewhere else and get it stamped, do you?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And that's the same on the way in and the way out.
Right.
And some countries, and because it's absolutely clear that every country is sovereign in the EU when it comes to imposing its rules. So if you wanted just to have an officer sitting there at a desk and we all line up and he or she checks the passports and stamps them, they can do that. Or they can slightly speed things up by doing the checking this is a valid passport and it belongs to Mike Graham, to kind of help things along, and then just there's an officer who always has to stamp you in and out.
Yes, but it sounds like it's a bit of a delaying factor more than anything else. Let's have a look at what Keir Starmer reckons e-gates are for, because I think he's got the wrong end of the stick.
I have to say, when I was with the staff, they were equally excited about the e-gates and being able to go on their holidays, which they've obviously already planned, and not be in the horrendously long queues. So on both fronts, lower prices in places like Lidl and the e-gates, so they can go on holiday more quickly. The staff here are very pleased to see the work on the deal that we did yesterday.
Yeah,
I mean,
interesting.
He's got that wrong, hasn't he? So he hasn't said, actually, what happens when you go through the e-gate is that, you, as you've just very well explained, you then have to go and stand in another queue anyway.
No, and there's a couple of things going on there. First of all, he knows that countries one by one are thinking, OK, we will connect our e-gates to the UK Home Office computer because that's going to be in their interests as well as ours. Yeah. Interestingly, yesterday, the Foreign Office Minister, Baroness Chapman of Darlington, said the Prime Minister has been clear there should be no reason why European countries cannot go further and faster on this now. Well, yeah, there is. I mean, they might want to commit money and effort to things which are going to benefit their citizens rather than helping the UK clear up one of the many travel messes by our democratic decision to leave the EU. So things are happening, but I really caution the government against over-promising. They've said, yeah, Brussels wants to do this. Well, that's fine, but it's not up to Brussels.
No, exactly.
It's up to individual nations, yes.
And funnily enough, in the European Union, most nations of the European Union don't do what the European Union tells them to do, unlike what we did when we were in it, when we used to do everything they told us to do. But tell me, how was your journey through passport control in Lithuania?
Slow,
was it?
Because so probably 50-50 Brits and Lithuanians on the flight.
Right.
They go and the European
and do you have two separate queues?
Absolutely insists. Of course you've got two separate queues because that is a requirement by the European Union. It's one of the rules that we helped to put in when we were in the EU. And so, yeah, they were through in seconds and we were all just kind of mooching around trying to get through. And that's
that's the other thing. Why should the non-EU queue be any longer than the EU queue? If you're 50-50, surely it should go through at the same rate, shouldn't they?
Well, no, because if you're an EU citizen, all that the e-gate can do is say, is this a valid passport? Is it Mike Graham's? Yes, it is. Let him through. Right. Whereas they have to stamp our passports. Right. They actually have to look through and say, oh, have you been to the EU a lot? And have you done your 90 days? Have you got a valid ticket to go home? Can you show me? Right. Whereabouts are you staying? How much money have you got? These are all rules that we put in place that we ask.
See, I haven't found that at all, though. When I went to Italy, for example, say the year before last, it took no time at all. I flew into Bari when I was going on my holiday to Puglia, which is a lovely part of the world, by the way. I'm sure you've been. I found it very quick. And so I don't recognise that kind of looking through your passport, asking you for a ticket home. It didn't ask me for any of that. Didn't ask me for how much money I had. There was none of that.
No, but this is actually happening quite a lot in Germany, in the Netherlands, and in Sweden. It happens quite a lot, and they did stop and have a chat. Are you working? What you do? You're going on holiday?
Yeah, see, I've never had that. I get that in America, which is fine. You expect it in America. I've never had it in Europe, though.
That may simply be that they are welcoming you to the.
They could just be fans of the show. They could be just fans of the show.
I think they are. Yeah. Who isn't, frankly?
I know.
And your passport is obviously from the Independent Republic of Mike Graham.
It is.
So
it's the only one.
Diplomatic access everywhere.
It is the only one. I'm just all I'm saying, Simon, is that it's sort of hit and miss. I think it seems to me. It seems some airports are better at handling things than others. I've waited in queues in Turkey. The first time I went to Turkey, I was amazed to find that, suddenly had to pay cash money to the guy behind the till, who apparently wanted us to pay him to enter his country, which nobody had told us about. And luckily I had some money to give him, because normally I don't carry cash, and that was a bit of a surprise. And similarly, when we went into Montenegro last year, that was quite slow going through, because everybody seemed to be going through the same place. Everybody was in the same queue. So it just sort of depends on which airport you go through, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Obviously, Turkey and Montenegro both outside the EU, and so yes, there is just a single queue, and it could well take a long time. But it is just completely variable, which is why government ministers saying things can only get better is perhaps a little unwise.
Yeah, well, they're definitely wrong.
I'm sure.
They're definitely wrong about that. What can you tell us about life back in the UK? Because I keep hearing bad things from the train companies. Avanti, I think, have been in a terrible state most of this week for one reason or another. We saw that the first nationalised version of South Western came complete with a rail replacement bus, which I thought was pretty opposite. So what's happening this weekend?
OK, well, you've got, for instance, a strike tomorrow by train drivers belonging to the ASLEF union.
Oh, really?
Working for Hull Trains.
Okay.
That's going to affect Hull Kingston Rovers fans travelling to Wembley. But the train company says, actually, we're running most of our services, and obviously there's options. You don't have to travel on Hull Trains. Cross country, there's probably going to be quite a lot of cancellations on Sunday. There were, I think, 50 last Sunday, and that's due to, well, basically staff not having to work on Sunday, and frankly, why should they? But that's we don't have anything
because there are
like
trains, I suppose would be my answer. If you work for the train company and the trains are going on Sunday, you've got to work on Sunday.
Well, except that you haven't, according to many of the agreements. And so once Great British Railways starts, and this is another things can only get better for you, Mike, once Great British Railways starts, then everyone will be on the same terms and conditions. But guess what? ASLEF, the train drivers union, and RMT, the biggest union, are going to say, yep, we can all have the same terms and conditions, and we're going to demand that everybody is on the absolute best.
Of course.
So that's going to be quite exciting for the Treasury to discuss.
Well, Rachel Reeves is going to have to give them even more money. She gave them 15%. They've come back for more. What a surprise. Listen, what are you doing in Lithuania? What's going on there?
Oh, I'm travelling to the Suwałki Gap, this little strip of territory about 40 miles wide between Russia and Belarus. Ooh. And it's all quite strategically important. If the tanks were to start rolling, that's where they would go. So
well, don't worry, because we're on a war footing now, so we're ready for anything. So don't worry, just let us know if you can. Simon, very good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Simon Calder on the front line. With Russia, checking it out to make sure that everything's copacetic and nobody's going to be invading anybody anytime soon. Let's get a voice note from Pete.
Now, sit down, Prime Minister. You know you're talking a load of rubbish again. Sit down. I'll not have that sort of talk in the House.
There is a war footing, I think. I'm pretty sure there is. Coming up, we're going to talk about Birmingham's bin strike. Apparently it's going to go on till Christmas now. Let's talk.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:41. I'm Mike Graham with you for about another 15 minutes. Alex Phillips will be here, of course, to take you through until 1 o'clock. And then we've got the all-female panel on Plank of the Week tonight. If you're doing requests now for Jeremy Kyle, then this is Keith in the Philippines. I'd like to say hello to everybody who knows me. Says Keith. Yeah, OK then. Whatever. Gavin says, morning, Mike. Gavin from Scotland. If we left the ECHR, all the illegal immigrants in prison and family that came with them get deported. Then we would have funds to put into the economy. Thanks, and keep up the good work. I think that's right. And Trump ban on some visitors to the US, says Bill. This is just a common sense approach to border security. If only Dumb and Dumber, a.k.a. Starmer and Lammy, had the balls to do this, every EU member state will be doing something similar in the next 2 to 3 years. The ECHR will be dumped or savagely amended. Yeah, Donald Trump's banned people from 12 separate countries from going into the United States of America, including Afghanistan, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Yemen, I think Sudan as well, Eritrea, a lot of countries where people from those parts come to Britain. But we should do the same thing, surely. Right now, though, let's talk to Councillor Marion Jenkins, Shadow Cabinet Member for Finance at Birmingham City Council, the man that keeps us up to date with the Birmingham bin strike, because it turns out, Councillor Marion, very good morning to you. The strike is going to go on, I think, for another several months, possibly up to Christmas.
Yes, that's right. The union held a ballot. They had a high turnout, 75%, and 97%, I see reported, of the workers voted to continue the strike, and that means that the union wouldn't need to reballot again until December. So there's the prospect for it to carry on right up through the winter.
I mean, it seems inconceivable to me that they can't sort this out. It's almost as though they don't want to. You know, who's at fault here?
It's clear who's at fault, and that's the Labour administration in Birmingham, Mike. I mean, we called for a debate on this several months ago to discuss what we think is the solution. In fact, it's the only solution to resolve this. And Labour just refused to even allow us to debate it. They're in a very difficult situation because they've got themselves into a bind that goes back to a series of historical mistakes since 2017. They're in a position where about half the existing cabinet are members of Unite, which is the union that they're in dispute with. So they're hopelessly conflicted. And they're in a position where they have to take some decisions that will be very unpopular with the union, because if they don't do that, then the equal pay liability that is continuing to build up in Birmingham will just get larger and larger.
Yeah, I mean, it is ridiculous. And why is there no interference in this whole debacle from Angela Rayner and the main sort of government of this land? Because it turns out that they are in receipt of quite a lot of money from the Unite Union, which may be the reason why they don't want to get involved. But surely that should be the reason they should get involved, to say to Unite, look, you know, you might be bankrolling some of what we do, but you need to, you know, sharpen up here and just do a deal.
Yeah, well, quite. I mean, I can understand why the government wouldn't want to get involved, because it's a very difficult dispute for the Labour movement. It was Labour legislation, but back in the days of Blair and Brown, that caused this equal pay problem. It was then the Labour administration in Birmingham that failed to act, essentially by putting a job evaluation scheme in place. They failed to act since 2017, so you're talking about 6 years, even though we warned them at the time. So they've accrued this huge equal pay liability that is getting worse by up to £14 million a month until they put an evaluation scheme in place. But part of doing that means they have to downgrade some of the workers. And there's two separate groups. They have to end the grade 3s that they created that should never have been created. But it's got worse since this started. They now have to downgrade all the drivers from grade 4 to grade 3. So it's understandable why the workers are upset. But the Labour Council have no choice. If they don't do this, then they continue to rack up an equal pay liability from the claims of all the people who are not bin men, but are doing jobs that can be compared with bin men, which is the consequence of that crazy legislation that was introduced in the dying days of the Blair-Brown era.
Yeah. Absolutely shocking state of affairs. Councillor, very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us. Myron Jenkins there telling us why this seemingly intractable dispute is going to continue to go on for at least the next several weeks and months, and possibly all the way up to Christmas. Absolutely extraordinary. Let's get a voice note from Steve.
I travel in and out of Faro 8 or 9 times a year. I can tell you that the e-gates are going to make no difference. The quantity of them is the same as the typical number of border guards on duty. Scanning will be the same thing because your passports were scanned by the border guard now before they stamp them. So they'll stamp them and scan them ourselves. We'll scan them ourselves and they'll be stamped by the border guard. I think it's going to make the least bit of difference. I'm going again in a couple of weeks and I'll report back if it is, and credit to Portugal, but I fear nothing will happen.
Yeah, Steve, as I said to Simon Calder, it all seems to depend very much more on the state the airport is in and on the way that they can handle crowds of people, because obviously some airports are busier than others, some airports are better at handling it than others, and some are just always going to be holding you up and you're always going to be in a queue. It's as simple as that. And if they can get more gates and more staff, then obviously everybody gets through a lot quicker. That would be what I would suggest that they do. But the idea that Keir Starmer's told everybody in Lidl, oh, we have to get through to your holidays much quicker, is complete and utter tosh, as you might expect from the Prime Minister. Never mind that. There's some good news. People have asked me for good news all day. Here's some good news. We're giving you the chance to win FIFA Club World Cup final tickets, thanks to our friends at DAZN. Here's everything you need to know.
Hi, it's Jim White here. Here at talkSPORT, we're gearing up for the Club World Cup in the United States. And to celebrate, we've got 2 tickets to the final in New York on July the 13th to give away. We'll sort flights, accommodation, and give you £5,000 spending money to spend however you like. 18 plus, UK excluding Northern Ireland. All you have to do to enter is text the word football to 83338 by the 13th of June at 11 p.m. and you're in the draw. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You must have the bill payer's permission, or send your name and number by post to Club World Cup Final Prize Draw, P.O. Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on June the 18th.
This is a TalkSPORT limited competition run on TalkSPORT Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com. Coming up next, we're going to take more of your calls. We're going to take more of your voice notes, of course, as well. Morning, Mike. If the UK is on a war footing, as Keith said, does that mean NATO is also on the same war footing? After all, we are a NATO member. Well, that's a very good point. And one from Paul in Exeter says, hilarious, Starmer's phony war. He thinks the Russians will be marching up the mall with snow on their boots. Yeah, and Stephen in Belfast says, morning, Mike, imagine if we were actually on a war footing. Every day, this would be the story. This man has no clue and is not only incompetent, but he's also dangerous. I agree with that. I think it's absolutely ridiculous, some of the stuff that he's been coming out with. Coming up, though, we've got much more. This, of course, is Talk.
I do have to give Elon credit when it comes to the election of President Trump. Like he said on Twitter, he said, I don't think that he would have been elected if it weren't for me. There's some truth to that, because I watched multiple episodes of Joe Rogan where Elon's there talking about government waste. Then millions of people were listening to Donald Trump for the first time in these long format chats. I do think that there's some legitimacy to Elon saying, how ungrateful when I helped get you to where you are.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. 9:53 is the time, and we are here until 10 o'clock, of course. Alex Phillips will be along very, very shortly to tell us what's coming up on her show, taking us all the way through until 1 o'clock. Alex is also on the all-female panel tonight on Plank of the Week. You don't want to miss that, going out at 7 p.m. Very, very funny one this weekend, I have to say. Do you get the impression it's being done on purpose to bring in a fake plague of some sort, to then bring in another scamdemic and lockdown, says Napa. I don't think so. And HIN says this: the lovely Sarah P. and her excellent Burka question may have helped Mr. Yusuf out the door. I think there may be some truth to that. And Jill says, I flew out of Farage in December 2015 and it was bedlam then. Perhaps the queues are a consequence of bad management at the airport more than Brexit. Well, I think that's the thing. I'm getting lots of messages from people saying, you know, don't recognise what Simon Calder's saying about all the queues that people get into, because plenty of people travel all the time around Europe, and basically when they find themselves in the queue for non-EU passports, they actually get through quicker. And I think that's certainly been my experience in a lot of cases as well. And as I said, it all very much depends on who's actually running the airport. I don't recognise what Simon Calder is saying, says Lady Loud. She says, I've been all over in Europe in the last few years, and the only long queuing is at London Airport trying to get back in. Absolutely right. Now, we've got some few gaffes for you, because it's Gaff-Prone Friday, of course. Have a look at these and let me know.
You want to wake up every single morning? Well, my mate Mike, the legend Graham, here from 6 until 10. It's called Morning Glory. He's up and at it early, you know what I'm saying. 0344. That, ladies and gentlemen, was the laugh of a Tory MP. What, Mark Froswell, why are you laughing?
Because you were being funny. Anyway, move on.
Morning Glory, Mike Gree, see where I've gone there? MG, Morning Glory, up and at it.
Thank you very much.
He's telling me off, ladies and gentlemen.
Made a lot of big spending commitments. It gave his struggling opponents suddenly a chance to really rip into reform. And the numbers, frankly, didn't really stack up. We need to see... Sorry, I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. Bloody hay fever. I'm going to sneeze again, but I'm going to keep trying to make this point while I do it. I didn't sing for you, but I will do a comedy turn nonetheless.
To where we are as a party when it comes to... sorry, I've lost my earpiece now and I've lost you. When it comes as a party... Now I can hopefully hear you again. I think I've got you.
Yes.
Yeah, when it comes to fiscal responsibility.
Yes, absolutely right. Mel Stride there, Jeremy Kyle, and of course Harry Cole, the outgoing Sun political editor who's going off to America to seek his fortune as the North American editor of the Sun. David says this: what time do you think Keir Starmer will remember its D-Day anniversary? Yeah, he hasn't tweeted about that. He tweeted about congratulations to Davy Russell. Aye, did you do it or not? Did you? He said good for him. He says the Tories have looked the other way while water companies have pumped a tidal wave of raw sewage into our waters. He says promises made, promises delivered. He said he's wished everybody a happy Eid Mubarak to all Muslims celebrating Eid al-Adha in the UK and around the world. But he hasn't mentioned D-Day. What's wrong with him? Why has he not mentioned D-Day? It's nearly 10 o'clock in the morning. The veterans are arriving over there in Normandy. What an absolute shambles. Shall we have a look at Davy Russell again? Here he is with the Scottish journalist.
Do you think they were right to scrap the winter fuel payment for pensioners?
The hard decisions to take.
Do you think they were right?
Well, they were very hard decisions to take.
Do you think they were right to do it? It was a hard decision. Do you think they made the right decision?
Well, They took it based on the decisions, the circumstances they'd inherited.
So you back them? You back the Chancellor, you back the Prime Minister on it?
They had very hard decisions to make.
And you back them?
I totally think that the decisions they had to make were based on the previous government's mismanagement of the country.
And you back them on it?
On the doorsteps here, people are...
Yeah, but you back the government, you back the Prime Minister and the Chancellor. You can just tell me yes or no.
Well, I wasn't involved in the decision, and this is a Scottish Parliament election.
See you! Right? It's amazing. I do love Glasgow. It's a fantastic place. That's how people speak. It's literally like that, you know. But they're not even being horrible. That's how they speak when they're being nice. You dead Jews, you want a drink? Hey! Last year, says Stuart, I flew from Tunisia to Munich, and frankly, I was treated like a prisoner of war for an hour while queuing. They said it was because we had voted for Brexit. It was our own fault. Well, it was Munich. I mean, you know, they do that. Here's one from Steph, who says, I work for a Dutch company and travel via Amsterdam to head office. It's quicker through the non-EU gates every single time. And Keith says, I've got an EU passport and I always use the EU lane, there's no delay. Well, bully for you, Keith. He lives in Blackpool. With regards to e-gates, why are EU passports allowed to use our UK e-gates when arriving in UK airports? Well, that's another good question. And one from Pete in Benidorm. I'm out in Benidorm, came through the e-gate on the way here, got my passport stamped. We waited about 25 minutes after coming off the plane. It really was no stress at all. Yeah, it's like I say, I mean, it really just depends on where you are. Lanzarote, says Kev. I spent 90 minutes in passport control last night at Lanzarote Airport. I asked a member of staff what the problem was. He said Brexit. Classic. Yeah, but they say that. But, you know, it's not, is it? Alex Phillips is here.
I'm like the world expert on Lanzarote, FYI. Yeah. You know, like I lived there during lockdown and I go back there all the time.
Okay.
And no, they don't actually have e-gates at Lanzarote. Right. But normally, when you look at it, the queues move really quickly, and it just depends if there are sort of 2 or 3 flights coming at once.
I mean, it's not true to say that because of Brexit